Chapter 1611. Qi Xianxian snatched the map from his hand, crumpled it into a ball, threw it on the ground, and stomped on it. "Hey, big sister, why did you throw my map away?" Little Fatty couldn't help but exclaim. "Was the person who sold you the map sneakily wearing a black robe and covering his face?" That's right, that's right." Little Fatty wasn't stupid and immediately understood. Could it be that there's something wrong with this map? Look. Qi Xianxian showed her map to Little Fatty. "It's exactly the same." Little Fatty immediately cheered. "Heh heh." Qi Xianxian pointed at the river drawn by the red line on the map. "Do you see it? Do you see that little red dot behind the river?" Little Fatty's mouth instantly gaped open. Could it be that this little red dot is Lava Mountain Range? That's right. The two girls nodded at the same time and looked at Little Fatty sympathetically. "Little Fatty, you've been tricked too." "Fuck. Is the person who sold the map deliberately looking for trouble?" Little Fatty shrieked and couldn't help but turn to look at the mountain path they came from. He instantly deflated. Heavens, there's still such a long way to run back. Can we still make it in time for the student exam? Qi Xianxian waved her hand and released a majestic golden lion. "I didn't want to be so ostentatious at first, but time is limited now. Jojo, let's sit on the little lion." Arbor's eyes widened when he saw Qi Xianxian release her mystic beast. He bounced forward and kept stroking the golden lion's head with his small hands. Look, other people's mystic beasts were so mighty and domineering. They looked so beautiful. Qi Xianxian couldn't help but be startled. Then, she smiled and said, "Jojo, let's go." Arbor nodded, and the two of them flew onto the golden lion's back at the same time. When the little fatty Ko Hongwen saw this, he ran over like a ball and hurriedly called out, "Little sisters, give me a ride." "Who's your big sister?" The stoic face was expressionless as she glared at him coldly. "Men and women shouldn't touch each other." Scram. Qi Xianxian was even more direct. She lightly patted the lion's head. The lion leaped up and carried the two girls down the mountain, running steadily. The little fatty, Ko Hongwen, followed the golden lion down the mountain with tears streaming down his face. He waved his hands and shouted, "Little girls, wait for me." "Miss." The golden-haired lion ran very fast. After going down the mountain, it ran in the direction of Anka City. They were supposed to go straight to the lava mountains from the south gate of Anka City, but because of that lousy map, they went to the north gate. Going in the opposite direction, going in circles in an unknown mountain for such a long time really made people speechless. If they circled around Anka City, they would definitely waste a lot of time. The best way was to pass through Anka City and go straight to the south gate. "Ladies! Wait for me." Little Fatty began to run wildly. Looking from afar, it was as if he was looking at a giant watermelon that was constantly rolling. The city gate was right in front of them. Arbor turned to look at Little Fatty, and a faint trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He couldn't tell that Little Fatty was also someone with remarkable abilities. It took them more than 2 hours to run from the nameless mountain to the north gate of Anka City. They didn't stop for even a moment during this time. Little Fatty was actually able to keep up with the golden lion's speed. He was also an incredible guy. Chapter 1612. Looks like he's a speed ability user. Arbor blinked. "We're almost at the city gate." Qi Xianxian looked at the toll checkpoint at the city gate with disgust in her eyes. "Jojo, should we get off?" "No need. Let's charge through," Arbor said coldly. Qi Xianxian froze for a moment before she laughed out loud. "Okay." Little Fatty, who had been running behind them, was dumbfounded when he saw that the two vigorous girls had no intention of summoning their mystical beasts even though they were already at Anka City's gate. Fuck, where did these two girls come from? Were they planning to charge into Anka City's checkpoint just like that? At this moment, the crowd in the queue had already discovered in horror that a golden-haired lion twice the size of an adult lion was running towards them. Everyone screamed and dodged to the sides. Their eyes were filled with disbelief as they looked at the two girls on the golden lion's back. Heavens, are they planning to charge into the city just like that? Ladies, you! The golden-haired lion leaped up, its forehooves landing heavily on the dusty ground, rolling up a string of sand grains. Wah! Mother, it's a lion. Don't go over there. Be careful not to fall. Who dares to trespass into Anka City? The two lines of people moved aside, leaving a path in the middle. The 5 or 6 ruffians who had set up the toll checkpoint at Anka City's gate saw the golden lion and the girls charging into the city. Do you want to die? Do you think you can trespass anywhere? Get off your mounts right now. The ruffians cursed angrily. Mystical beasts are not allowed to be summoned in Anka City without permission. Fuck, put away your mystical beasts. Right now. Ah! The ruffians screamed. The reason was that not only did the golden lion not stop, but it also sped up and rushed towards their checkpoint. The girls sitting on the lion's back laughed. Get out of my way, all of you. Get out if you don't want to die. Roar. The golden-haired lion pounced and stepped heavily on the fence of the checkpoint, crushing the fence into pieces. Bang! A ruffian soldier was directly sent flying by this force and fell to the ground miserably. Ah, you guys! Another ruffian had just pulled out a steel knife from his waist and was about to counterattack. A blue talisman flew towards him and landed on his body with a whoosh. He paused with the knife in his hand and looked at the oncoming golden lion in horror. Roar! Roar, roar! The golden lion roared angrily and kicked the guy away. After a loud rumbling sound, the golden lion shook off the broken fence in front of the city gate. It carried Arbor and Qi Xianxian and rushed into the city gate. The citizens lining up to enter the city were all dumbfounded. They couldn't believe their eyes. The two little girls had broken into Anka City in broad daylight. The soldiers were all frozen at the city gate by the body-securing talisman, standing there in a pitiful manner. After the two little girls rushed into the city, they quickly ran toward a deserted road. The little fatty ran into the city with his short legs and panted heavily. He looked at the soldiers sympathetically and patted one of them on the shoulder. Brother, I'm going in first. Chapter 16:13. The soldiers were immobilized by the body-securing talisman and naturally could not give him any response. The little fatty took large strides and chased in the direction that the golden lion had left. The commoners at the city gate looked at each other and waited for a while. Seeing that there was no other movement, they all ran out from the corners and surrounded the soldiers who were immobilized by the body-securing talisman, sizing them up curiously. These soldiers usually flaunted their prowess at the city gate and it was rare to see them suffer together. Everyone was secretly laughing in their hearts. After looking at their ugly state, everyone hurriedly rushed into the city. After all, it was rare that they did not have to pay to enter the city. When the guards of the city lord's mansion heard the news and rushed to the north gate, Arbor, Qi Xianxian and the rest had already disappeared. The two of them had already charged out of the south gate and similarly used thunderous methods to subdue the guards of the south gate and left without saying a word. Qi Xianxian laughed out loud, awesome. This is how we should deal with this bunch of people. They are simply shameless. They still dare to ask us for the entrance fee. Once, twice, thrice, they still have the nerve to stretch out their hands and ask for it. Scram! Arbor glanced sideways and did not see the little fatty's round body rolling over. It seemed that he had thrown the little fatty away. The two of them exited the south gate and ran in the direction of the Red River marked on the map. Huff, huff, huff. Not long after, the little fatty appeared at the south gate, sweating profusely. He looked at the dozen or so soldiers who were also immobilized and grinned. Sigh, I ran to death. Really? The little fatty exhaled a few times and walked around the soldiers twice as he clicked his tongue. How pitiful, your opponent is actually such a strong great talisman master. From the north gate to the south gate, that crazy little girl had thrown at least 50 body-securing talismans. How could they fight against such a great talisman master? Little fatty sighed and heard footsteps coming from afar. It must be the guards of the city lord's mansion. They were rushing towards the south city gate. This bunch of idiots, who knew where they had gone? The little fatty grinned, then turned around and ran out of the southern city gate. Following the tracks of the golden lion, they soon arrived in front of a red river. It was unknown if this river had been heated up by the temperature of the nearby lava mountains, but the entire river seemed to be boiling. Little fatty picked up a stone and threw it into the water. With a light, chee sound, the stone was swallowed into dregs by the water in a matter of minutes. The little fatty was speechless. He turned his head and looked along the wide river. His eyes suddenly lit up. He hurriedly ran over and waved vigorously at the two girls standing in front of the river. Little sisters, it's so good to see you. Arbor turned around and saw little fatty rolling in front of them like a big watermelon. She pursed her lips and expressionlessly summoned the divine bird Qing Wan. When little fatty saw this, he hurriedly went forward and cupped his hands towards Arbor. Little girl, give me a ride. Look, this big bird is so big. I'll just sit on its tail. I won't be rude to the two of you. Where's your own Xian beast? Qi Xian placed her hands on her hips and sized up the little fatty before she bluntly asked the little fatty. Chapter 16:14. I. The little fatty scratched his head and chuckled, my mystic beast isn't as powerful as yours. It can't fly or run. What mystic beast is that? Qi Xian glanced at him and asked suspiciously, let it out for us to see. Okay. The little fatty suddenly stretched out one of his short legs and assumed a horse stance as he muttered, come out, my Xian beast. Qi Xian looked at the little fatty and couldn't help but find it funny. Could it be that every time this fellow summoned a mystic beast, he had to mutter for half a day? By the time he finished muttering and assumed a posture to welcome the mystic beast, the other party would have already beaten him to the ground. What kind of mystic beast was this? It was so arrogant and slow. Boom! A dull sound landed on the wetland beside the Red River. Arbor and Qi Xian looked and couldn't help but twitch their mouths. Lying in front of them was a huge tortoise the size of a small hill. No wonder the little fatty said that it couldn't run or fly. This tortoise lazily lay beside the Red River, as if it was a tortoise sunbathing and couldn't wait to flip its belly over and bask in the sun. From the moment it came out until now, it didn't even glance at its master. It was extremely arrogant. The little fatty smiled embarrassedly at the two ladies and hurriedly cupped his hands towards Arbor, young lady, please give me a ride. If there were no flying beasts to cross the Red River, then there was nothing he could do. In any case, this Red River definitely couldn't be crossed by a ferry. Even the sturdy rocks couldn't withstand the Red River for a second, let alone a wooden boat. Wouldn't entering the water be seeking death? Hey, look! Qi Xian squatted down and swept the sand with her small hand. After sweeping away the sand, a stone tablet was revealed half buried in the soil. There were 3 large words written on it, Lava Crossing. Damn, this isn't a red river at all. This is lava. Arbor's lips curved. Naturally, there is a lot of lava buried under the lava mountain range. This was naturally not surprising. What was strange was that this lava river should have overflowed from very deep underground. Moreover, it had already formed the scale of a river. Instead, it became a natural barrier for the top academies. Master, there is a defensive shield above 100 meters. It is very strong and cannot be broken. Qing Luan flapped its wings and jumped to Arbor's side. Over 100 meters. In other words, Qing Luan could not fly too high under this defensive barrier. Otherwise, it would not be able to enter the range of the defensive barrier and would still be suppressed. But if he was forced to fly at a low altitude, her gaze was focused on the lava. Suddenly, a piece of raw meat appeared between her fingers and she threw it into the lava. The piece of meat was thrown high into the air before it fell into the lava. In just a few seconds, 17 to 18 1-meter-long sword-toothed red fish jumped out of the lava and bit onto the piece of meat. After competing with each other to tear it apart, the piece of meat was instantly turned into minced meat. Qi Xuanxuan's face turned slightly pale. Looking at the 1-meter-long sword-toothed red fish that jumped out of the lava, she felt that under the sunlight, the fangs of the sword-toothed red fish emitted an eerie cold light. Little Fatty also shuddered. There are actually mutated red fish in the lava? This was too strange. How did the saber-toothed red fish survive in such a scorching lava? Chapter 16:15. Nothing is impossible, Arbor said indifferently. Even humans could change according to the environment, let alone animals. Looking at those sword-toothed red fish, the average one was more than a meter long, and a few were even 2 meters long. Not only were their mouths full of fangs, but even their skin was covered in a layer of fiery red substance. It was probably this substance that protected them from being melted into ashes by the boiling lava. These strange fish should be equivalent to an intermediate level 3 zombie. Arbor speculated, look at how they can jump 100 meters. The Top Academy deliberately set up a defensive barrier above 100 meters. Forcing the intruder into the attack range of the school of fish, it was truly a natural barrier. Arbor glanced at the lava mountain range behind the lava crossing. Before they even got close, they could already feel the heat waves rolling towards them. You've decided? Decided what? To go to such an unreliable academy, Arbor said indifferently. If she guessed correctly, the entrance test of the Top Academy was to successfully pass the lava crossing. Looking at the lava crossing, which formed a ring-shaped water vein that surrounded the entire lava mountain range, the test was obvious. Little Fatty nodded vigorously. I heard that the Top Academy can conduct one-on-one guidance and training. It has all 5 spiritual elements. It's very suitable for us to enter and study. Xiao Mu inwardly rolled her eyes before coldly saying, it's best if you don't hold out too much hope. Why? Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian asked in unison. Because the disappointment is usually greater. After saying that, he put away Qing Luan and released a blazing blood phoenix. Little Fatty's eyeballs were about to fall out as he watched from the side. Xiao Xiao, Xiaojie. You actually have 2 mystic beasts. Is this a FF Phoenix? Forgive Little Fatty for stuttering, but he had rarely seen a mystic cultivator who could have 2 mystic beasts at once. Little Fatty didn't notice that Qi Xianxian, who was standing beside him, was already petrified. Qi Xianxian was very clear that Jojo still had a little white snake by his side. The blazing blood fire phoenix proudly swayed its tail and flew to Arbor's side. When she leaped up, the fire phoenix soared into the sky with a whoosh. It spread its wings, which were burning with flames. The man and the phoenix had just flown to the middle of the lava when they heard a splash. Countless saber-toothed red fish that were over a meter long jumped out of the lava and opened their mouths that were filled with sharp teeth, biting towards Arbor and the fire phoenix. Screech. The blood-blaze phoenix let out an angry cry, and a raging wall of fire instantly appeared beneath it. Like building a wall of flames, the sword-toothed red fish that jumped up to bite were all smashed down by the wall of flames. Arbor pointed at Qi Xianxian and the Little Fatty. The blood-blaze phoenix turned around and dived towards the 2 of them. Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty's hearts thumped wildly at the same time. Although they knew that the phoenix would not attack them, they could only watch helplessly as an incomparably huge phoenix swooped down towards them. The heat wave that assaulted their faces instantly enveloped them. That kind of feeling was incomparably satisfying. Arbor reached out and pulled, throwing the two of them directly onto the fire phoenix's back. The fire phoenix turned around, and its wings drew a lonely arc in the air as it flew towards the opposite side of the lava. To make up for yesterday's episode. Chapter 16:16. The saber-toothed red fish leaped out of the lava and jumped 100 meters, but because it crashed into the fire wall, it was slapped down by the heat of the flames. Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty both heaved a sigh of relief and sat upright on the blazing blood fire phoenix's back, not daring to look around. After a sharp and clear cry, the blazing blood fire phoenix flapped its huge wings and fluttered to the front of the lava mountain range, flying straight up the mountain. Little Fatty instantly felt that hugging the little girl's thigh was the right thing to do. Otherwise, it would be an impossible task for that little tortoise of his to climb up this 1,000-level lava mountain range with only his little tortoise. The blazing blood fire phoenix's aura was vast and mighty, and its heavy ancient phoenix aura directly crushed all the hibernating beasts on the lava mountain range. The beasts that originally wanted to climb out to take a look at Feng Zi could only hug their heads and lie in their cave abodes, not daring to come out. This was the first time Arbor realized that this egg was so useful. She raised her small hand and rubbed its furry head, saying earnestly, "Giving you so much black spirit jade isn't completely ineffective." Ever since knowing that there might be black spirit jade in the frigid pond, the little fellow had always left it alone. Actually, she was really a very generous little master to her beasts. The blazing blood fire phoenix squatted in the frigid pond and ate more than 1,000 pieces of black spirit jade, but she didn't say anything and just let it do as it pleased. Even when Little Tree repeatedly slandered her and asked her to kick that wasteful phoenix egg out of the frigid pond, she didn't pay attention to Little Ball. Black spirit jade was not only good for replenishing the 5 spirits, but also had a great nourishing effect on beasts of divine beast rank and above. It was a pity that this plaything was something that could only be chanced upon and not sought. Who knew if there were any extra black spirit jade at the bottom of the frigid pond? Arbor's gaze flickered. She raised her small hand and gently rubbed the blazing blood fire phoenix's head again. "Huahua, Master wants to ask you something. Is there any more black spirit jade at the bottom of the frigid pond?" The blazing blood fire phoenix nodded vigorously. "There's still a lot. Master, when are you going to take a look?" "I'll bring you there." Arbor nodded. "Don't worry. Let's go to the peak first." "Hey, look. There seems to be a person standing on the rock." Arbor looked in the direction that Little Fatty was pointing at. Indeed, on a protruding rock at the peak of the mountain, there stood a fool waving a little yellow flag. He looks like a fool. The little yellow flag was clearly being waved at them. Waving what? Wave your sister. If he did not bring the students up the mountain, the students would have to think of a way by themselves. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. No one. Qi Xianxian, dot. Little Fatty, dot. Screech. The blazing blood fire phoenix let out a shrill cry and flew towards the peak of the lava mountain range. The force of the dive brought about gusts of strong wind, rolling up sand and stones that almost blinded the eyes of everyone on the peak. Many female students subconsciously reached out to cover the sand in front of their eyes, choking on the sand and coughing. Boom! The phoenix spread its wings and landed on the peak of the mountain. Its gorgeous fiery red feathers gently spread out and almost everyone was forced to retreat. There was almost no place to stand. Wow! Are my eyes playing tricks on me? This? Is it? Is it a mystic beast? Chapter 16:17. I think I've seen it before in the Book of Divine Beasts and Strange Creatures. It's an ancient fire phoenix. Damn, Which aristocratic family's young miss came to this godforsaken academy to study? Arbor stretched out her hand. The blazing blood fire phoenix let out a cry, turned into a ball of fire, and rushed into her body, returning to Paradise Planet to rest. There were many young men and women standing on the peak. Many pairs of eyes looked at Arbor, Qi Xianxian, and Little Fatty in astonishment. Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty, who were following Miss Chiao, suddenly felt a huge pressure. What was going on with this situation where everyone was looking at them? Cough, cough, cough. The pitiful guy waving the little yellow flag on the rock quickly flew down, choking on a mouthful of sand. He squinted his eyes and said angrily, "You guys? Who are you guys? Why did you trespass into our elite academy?" Arbor turned her head and looked coldly at the young man. He was dressed in a green robe, which was very plain. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes, and looked very silly. Qi Xianxian put her hands on her waist and shouted angrily, "Didn't your academy recruit students and ask us to come? You still have the nerve to say that? Setting such a difficult test, are you recruiting students or trying to kill people?" What did you say? What test? The Red River at the foot of the mountain is formed by lava. It's surrounded by the mountain. Other than flying, how can you walk? The green-robed young man was reprimanded by Qi Xianxian, and he stammered, We sent people to the foot of the mountain a few days ago to receive you. You missed the time to go up the mountain. Who knew that this was the last day, and there were still people coming up the mountain? Moreover, they came up the mountain riding on a fire phoenix. This was too fucking high profile. Moreover, he had been standing on the climbing rock and waving the little yellow flag for them to land at the entrance. In the end, these people actually flew all the way to the peak and landed where the crowd gathered. It was obvious that they wanted to show off for everyone to see. As for the other students, they would usually arrive at the Red River 1 or 2 days in advance. Looking at these 3 people, it was obvious that they came from rich families. They couldn't bear hardships at all, and they weren't even serious about studying. Put away your disdain and guesses. Arbor suddenly stretched out his leg and drew a dark gray circle on the ground with the tip of his foot. Fight me if you're not convinced. Qi Xianxian. Little Fatty. Great Aunt is so direct. But why did he like this temperament so much? The more he looked at her, the more he liked her. The first one to step out of the circle loses and must apologize. Arbor stood in the circle and beckoned the young man with his finger. Come. Cut the crap. Let's fight then, where's the time to talk nonsense? Everyone was speechless. What was going on? Before they could recover from the shock of seeing an ancient fire phoenix, they were stunned by the scene in front of them that said, "If you want to fight, come on." The green-robed young man was obviously amused. He lifted his robe and stepped into the circle. He said angrily, "Little girl, it's not good to be too proud. You must know that there's always someone better than you. Always maintain a humble and cautious attitude." Boom! Xiaomu grabbed his arm and, with a flip of her hand, she pinned the green-clothed man to the ground, causing his left cheek to crash into the dirt. Chapter 16-18. Only when the green-clothed man felt his face come into contact with the ground and smelled the scent of yellow soil did he realize with shock that he had been pressed to the ground with a single hand in the blink of an eye. Oh my God! He was a man, no, he was a man who was about to break through to become a level 2 spirit master, but he was actually instantly put down by a girl who looked like she was 14 or 15. How could he endure this? I don't need to be cautious when dealing with you guys. Arbor let go of her hand and took half a step back. She narrowed her eyes and waved at him. Again. The green-clothed man only felt a burning sensation on his face, and he crawled up from the ground with his face covered in grime. He looked at Xiao Mu in embarrassment and coughed lightly as he said, "Little miss, I was careless just now. This time I won't hold back, you have to be careful." Boom! Arbor dodged and quickly closed in on him. She lifted her leg and kicked. Even though the green-clothed man had already reacted quickly and stretched out his two hands to cover his body with spiritual energy, he still couldn't withstand Arbor's fierce kick. In an instant, the green-clothed man flew out of the circle, and the surrounding students hurriedly retreated. After the man was kicked out of the circle, he fell to the ground with a thud. This time, everyone looked at Arbor with a bit of fear in their eyes. The first time she had single-handedly subdued a level 2 spirit master, it could be said that it was due to luck. But now, in the instant of a direct hit, the level 2 spirit master couldn't even block one of her moves. This was strength. Following Xiao Mu's light footsteps forward, the surroundings were deathly silent. Everyone subconsciously retreated a few steps, emptying out a crescent-shaped space in the center. Arbor walked in front of the green-clothed man and looked at him coldly. "Apologize." The green-clothed man couldn't suppress the bitterness in his heart. He nodded and said softly, "I'm sorry, it was my wild guess. Be more careful next time. If you don't understand the situation, don't look at people with contempt," Arbor said coldly. "We just got lost, that's why we're late." Little Fatty, who was still immersed in the words "this little girl is so formidable," slipped and almost fell. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch a few times as he cursed in his heart. What an honest little grandaunt. Actually, it was fine if he didn't add the last sentence. "What are you all doing?" Just as the crowd was chattering away, a cold voice swept through the crowd, instantly suppressing everyone's voices. A middle-aged man in his 40s slowly walked over. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, and they immediately locked onto Arbor's group. "Are you the ones causing trouble?" The little Fatty and Qi Xianxian met each other's eyes before striding forward in unison to stand next to Xiao Mu and look at that middle-aged man together. The middle-aged man sneered, "Were you the ones who rode the fire phoenix to the peak and caused panic?" Little Fatty sneered, "A mystical beast can cause them to panic. If you're so weak, you might as well stay at home and embroider. What's the point of cultivating and walking the path of immortality?" Arbor's mouth curved slightly and nodded in agreement. Qi Xianxian mocked, "Needles prick embroidery. You might as well stay at home and be a young master or young mistress. You." The group of students' faces turned green and white. Chapter 16-19. The middle-aged man pursed his lips and looked coldly at the three of them. "Ladies and young masters of aristocratic families, if you want to show off, then you've come to the wrong place. You should go to the 4 great academies of Sun, Moon and Stars. That is where the real celebrities gather." The middle-aged man said coldly. Arbor was instantly impatient. Why did she meet so many self-righteous people everywhere she went? Wouldn't it be better to find a natural abode and cultivate on my own? How could it be worth wasting my time on these inexplicable people and matters? After making up her mind, the little fellow decisively turned around and left. She didn't even bother to say a word and directly waved at Qi Xianxian and little Fatty who were behind her. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. He really didn't expect the student in front of him to have such a bad temper. After saying a few words, she immediately turned around and left. She didn't even bother to explain herself. "Jojo." Qi Xianxian hurriedly chased after her. Jojo wasn't even here, what was the point of her staying here? Little Fatty turned around and looked at the middle-aged man, then also ran towards the two ladies. "Wait for me, let's go down the mountain together." "You." The middle-aged man secretly clenched his fist and sneered at the three of them. "So arrogant and unsociable. You're not suitable to study in the top academies. Yes, you're not welcome here. Hurry up and leave." The group of students also started to shout at the same time. Arbor turned her head and glanced at them in disdain. She coldly said, "Trash like you are not fit to be my classmates." She could feel a strong sense of rejection from these people. She didn't know why, even though it was the first time she met them, these people were rejecting her, Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty. Since that was the case, why should she treat them with a generous attitude? This little fellow had always been someone who would respect you tenfold. If you offended her, she would return the favor tenfold. Hence, she really didn't like these students. If they weren't welcome, then so be it. She didn't have to stay in this lousy academy. Arbor walked a few steps and was about to summon the blazing blood phoenix to bring them away. All of a sudden, a transparent ladder descended from the sky one after another. At first glance, the ladder was very transparent, but when he looked at it again, he couldn't help but feel slightly shocked. It turned out that this ladder was actually built with water spirits, layer upon layer, as if it had fallen from the 9 heavens. Looking up, one simply couldn't see the end of it. Wow! What a powerful ability to control the spiritual water. Arbor and the other two blinked their eyes and looked up at the sky. It wasn't just the 3 of them. In fact, all the other students on the lava peak were shocked as well. He had never seen such a shocking scene before. The water spirit stairs spread out and landed on the ground, shining brightly one layer after another, as if that person had an endless amount of spiritual energy that he could squander as he pleased. When the middle-aged man saw the water spirit ladder, he hurriedly bowed in the direction of the ladder. Wei Wei greets Dean Yun. The other disciples weren't stupid. When they saw Instructor Wei Wei bowing respectfully towards the southeast, they hurriedly followed suit and bowed. They saw a man in plain clothes with loose long hair and a cold expression walking down the stairs. His walking speed didn't seem fast, but in a breath's time, he had already arrived in front of Arbor and the other two. Chapter 1620. The man's aloof gaze instantly locked onto Arbor's left wrist. He could faintly see a jade-green color flash across the flawless jade bracelet. The man's eyes flickered, and his gaze shifted up to land on a small face that was as cold as ice. He was startled and asked, "You're a disciple of the Holy Water Sect?" Arbor was also startled. Only then did she recall that Morong Sun mentioned in her letter that she only needed to show her jade bracelet to the principal of a top-notch academy. She had forgotten about this before. But what could she do even if she remembered now? She had already decided not to stay in this troublesome academy anymore. The little fellow was an unrestrained person who did not want to be restrained by anything. If you insist on doing things according to the rules with her, then I'm sorry, but please scram. What's your name? Arbor swept that man a glance and unwillingly replied, Arbor. The plainclothed man nodded and beckoned to her. Come with me. Instructor Wei Wei's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he saw this. He hastily walked up to block Principal Yun's path and straightforwardly said, Principal, these students haven't taken the entrance test yet, so logically speaking, you can't directly bring her into the academy. This is against the rules. The middle-aged man said straightforwardly, moreover, these people have been behaving like young masters and misses from patrician families from start to finish. They don't know the immensity of heaven and earth and only know how to cause trouble. It's truly inappropriate for them to stay in the academy and ruin the learning atmosphere here. It's fine. Unexpectedly, Principal Yun tossed 2 words at the middle-aged man after he said a bunch of things. This truly was a bit. The middle-aged man only felt that his efforts were strenuous and unrewarding. When he looked up again, Principal Yun looked like he had already made up his mind, so he shut his mouth and did not say anything else. Principal Yun beckoned to Arbor again. Come with me. Arbor was taken aback. Although this principal's expression was aloof, his attitude towards her was still quite amiable. As the saying went, don't slap a smiling person. The little fellow naturally could not go against his wishes, so she walked behind him. There seemed to be a voice in Arbor's heart that kept telling her that she had to follow him, she had to follow him. Wait. Arbor turned his head and looked at little Fatty and Qi Xianxian. The two of them came with me. If we want to leave, we will leave together. If we want to stay, we will stay together. Dean Yun turned to look at Qi Xianxian and little Fatty before nodding and saying, Wei Wei. Dean. The middle-aged man bowed. Arrange for the two of them to take the entrance test with everyone else. Wei Wei was stunned for a moment. He understood Dean Yun very well. Since he had already made a decision, there was no point in saying anything more. Thus, he nodded and said yes. There were stone huts all over the mountain. The rocks were all crimson red. Perhaps it was due to the influence of the lava circulation deep underground, but the entire lava mountain range looked bright red. Arbor followed Yun Zong all the way and passed by many small stone houses made of red bricks. When the two of them reached the peak of the lava mountain, Dean Yun suddenly stopped and turned to look at her. You're Arbor. Arbor nodded. Emicham, I'm Arbor. Yun Zong sighed. You are a disciple of the Holy Water sect, so you can stay and study in our top-notch academy with peace of mind in the future. You should also be new here, so there are still many things you need to learn. Have you comprehended the power of the 5 spirits? Arbor nodded. Activate the power of the 5 spirits in your body and let me see. I'm going to catch up on my sleep tomorrow. Chapter 1621. Arbor raised her small hand, and a winding stream of water spiraled out from between her fingers. Yun Qiong's gaze flickered. Holy water. The stream of water in Arbor's hand suddenly condensed into a ball of water, bobbing up and down on her small palm. Yun Qiong nodded. You haven't even broken through to the spirit realm, but you can. Before he could finish, the stream of water in Arbor's hand suddenly turned into ice and snow. With a slight wave of her hand, the snowflakes were flung into the distance, crashing heavily into the crimson mountain wall. After a few sizzling sounds, a row of tiny holes of the same size was punched into the sturdy mountain wall, with unparalleled precision. Yun Qiong's gaze flickered, and then he retracted his expression, turning to look at Arbor. Not bad. You can already condense water into ice, and turn ice into snow. Your basic control of spirit energy is also quite complete. Your current goal is to break through to the spirit realm as soon as possible and stabilize the spirit energy in your body. Yun Qiong stood with his hands behind his back, turning to look at her. In the future, you will follow me to the cloud-piercing cliff to cultivate. I will personally guide you. You want to take me as your disciple? Arbor was startled and asked. Yun Qiong's voice paused slightly, and he asked, Are you willing? Arbor immediately shook her head like a rattledrum. This time, it was Yun Qiong's turn to be stunned. This little fellow didn't know who he was, the famous Sir Lu Yun of the 6 prefectures continent. He wanted to take her as his disciple, but he was rejected. Did he not care about his reputation? Why? Yun Qiong asked unhappily. What a blind child. As expected of that woman's disciple, even her brain circuits were so different from others. I won't take anyone as my master in the future. The little fellow suddenly turned around, using the back of her head to face Yun Qiong, her eyes fixed on the mountain peak that pierced the clouds in the distance. There were a total of 103 peaks in the lava mountain range, and the distance between the peaks was quite far. What entered her eyes was a sea of red clouds. For some reason, Yun Qiong felt that this little figure was filled with desolation and loneliness. After a long time, Yun Qiong made an "oh" sound, carelessly reaching out to caress the back of the little fellow's head. Then, do you plan to take the entrance test with them? Arbor turned his head and nodded. What if Wei Wei makes things difficult for you again? Don't tell me you want to leave again, Yun Qiong said indifferently. Arbor blinked. Can I beat him? Who? Wei Wei. It was the middle-aged tutor who kept saying that a young lady from an aristocratic family like her was not welcome. A faint smile flashed through Yun Fiang's eyes. He shook his head and said, Wei Wei is a level 12 great spiritual master. With your strength, you can deal with spiritual masters below level 7. As for Wei Wei, unless you risk your life. Yun Fiang felt that this little fellow in front of him was full of secrets. Her strength could not be judged based on her current realm. Of course, Arbor wouldn't fight to the death with that crazy mentor, even though his tone was very annoying. However, there were hundreds and thousands of people in the Great Thousand Worlds. Arbor knew that he was not a flower. Naturally, he could not make everyone like him. There were those who liked him, and naturally there were those who hated him. At most, he would just ignore him in the future. Oh. Then I'll let him go, Arbor muttered stiffly, turning his little head and walking away. Yun Qiong couldn't help but find it funny, but he didn't stop him from leaving. Only Xiao Mu herself was clear on one thing. Chapter 1622. It seemed like no one who became Arbor's master had a good ending. Murong Sun was like that, and so was Long Chuyun. She better not acknowledge anyone as her master in the future to avoid harming other people. Xiao Mu returned to the group of people who were preparing to take the entrance test. Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian happily ran over and said in unison, Jojo, you're back. Qi Xianxian immediately turned to glare fiercely at Little Fatty. Shoo shoo shoo, who's your Jojo? I'm the one who called you Jojo. Arbor smiled and nodded. I planned to participate in the entrance test with you guys. Okay. We were just fretting. Just now, Instructor Wei said that we should form a 5-person team each. Their entrance test is to go to the depths of Lava Mountain Range to train. Qi Xianxian shrugged. She felt like this academy was a bit of a scam. How were they supposed to break through? Whose school's entrance exam would actually start with a real battle with real swords and spears? Even a large academy like Sunlight Academy's second test was to fight in a simulated environment. And it was in the depths of Lava Mountain Range. Everyone knew that the deeper one went into the mountain range, the more dangers there would be. Hey, Little Fatty, do you want to join our team? I'm Che Rumen, the team leader. A voluptuous girl around 17 or 18 years old walked up with 3 male team members. She crossed her arms and coldly looked at Arbor and Qi Xianxian. Is Little Fatty something you can call me? I'm not that close to you. Little Fatty immediately retorted. Qi Xianxian turned her face away and giggled. Che Rumen's face stiffened, and she angrily glared at Little Fatty. Xiao Mu curled her lips and sneered mockingly at Che Rumen. Interesting, he actually dared to poach Arbor in front of her. Damn Fatty. Don't think they're amazing just because they have an ancient fire phoenix. Didn't you hear the rules just now? Instructor Wei Wei said that once we enter Lava Mountain Range, everyone's mystic conscious will be sealed, so we can't summon mystic beasts. Heh, Fatty. I advise you to listen to Che Rumen and leave your trash team as soon as possible. In any case, you are a level 15 mystic cultivator. Don't tell me you want to stay in this kind of team and be burdened by 2 women with low cultivation, a stocky man beside Che Rumen said in a very disdainful tone. Watch your mouth, okay? The Little Fatty pointed at the stocky man and coldly shouted, both of them are my friends. If you dare to bully my friends, you'll have to ask my fist first. You don't know what's good for you. Che Rumen sneered, crossing her arms and looking around, is there anyone who wants to join our team? I'm a level 15 peak mystic cultivator. Of my 3 teammates, 2 are level 14 and 1 is a level 1 spirit master. Che Rumen's group immediately attracted the attention of many people after detonating their cultivation base. Most of them were people who had just entered Shuntian Prefecture from various lower star domains. Generally, it was already pretty good for their cultivation to reach level 14 Mystic Cultivator at the very most. Now that there was a level 1 Spirit Master in front of them, only a fool would not join their team. Che Ruman's small hand brushed past the stocky man's chest, intentionally or unintentionally, with the intention of teasing him. The latter straightened his back and hooked one arm around Che Ruman's well-developed and delicate body. He looked up at the sky with a self-satisfied smile on his lips. He was that level, one spirit master, Li Qian. Chapter 1623. When the surrounding people heard that Che Ruman's team was so strong, they hastily and enthusiastically signed up to join. In the end, Che Ruman picked and proudly chose a level 14 mystic cultivator as her teammate. The people who were still busy forming teams stopped in their tracks and turned to look at Che Ruman's team. They chattered enviously, so strong. Che Ruman's team should be the strongest team among us. When Che Ruman heard this, she felt her face light up. She smiled smugly and crossed her arms as she stood in front of the three people. Little fatty, if you regret it, come find me. I can still give you one more chance. If it weren't for the fact that this little fatty was a level 15 great mystic cultivator and was very powerful, she wouldn't have stuck her hot face to that fatty's cold butt time and time again. When Che Ruman said this, the level 14 mystic cultivator who just joined her team couldn't help but have an ugly expression. It felt like he was only a substitute. If the little fatty wanted to join, there was an 80% chance that he would still be kicked out of the team by Che Ruman. The middle-aged mentor, Wei Wei, who had been standing at the periphery of the crowd and watching coldly, said coldly, "Don't forget the rule I mentioned earlier. A team must have at least one support. Apothecaries, pill alchemists, physicians, speed ability users, and so on are all acceptable. However, let me give you a friendly reminder. I hope that each team will bring at least one pill alchemist or apothecary. You can't imagine the degree of danger in the depths of Lava Mountain Range." Che Ruman's team looked at each other in dismay. Che Ruman turned to look at the newly joined level 14 mystic cultivator. "Do you know how to support?" That person shook his head with a livid expression. Che Ruman shrugged. "Then I'm sorry. We need a level 14 mystic cultivator who can support. Just someone who knows a bit of simple medical skills will do." Someone who knows a bit of simple medical skills can also act as a support, Che Ruman thought. The middle-aged mentor, Wei Wei, was merely exaggerating to scare people. Which academy wouldn't send a mentor to accompany their students into a dangerous place to train? If there really was extreme danger, the mentor would definitely rush out to save them. Therefore, she felt that it was more reliable to bring along a team of teammates with top-notch attack power. She didn't really need those apothecaries and alchemists. They had already brought some medicine with them. At the critical moment, they could just take the medicine themselves. Why should they bring along a weakling who would get in the way? A man in his 20s walked out of the crowd. He had a wretched face and a protruding mouth. He looked at Che Ruman with a smile. Then, his shifty eyes moved to Arbor. He subconsciously licked his lips and said, "I'm a pharmacist." As he spoke, he released an extremely faint medicinal power. Arbor's gaze turned and then retracted. That monkey-faced man's gaze made her feel very uncomfortable. She had an impulse to dig out his eyes with her own hands. Che Ruman frowned slightly. She looked down on this sharp-mouthed monkey-cheeked man's face. He looked really wretched. But for the time being, he didn't have a better choice. He sized him up. "You're only level 13. "Yes, Mississippi. I'm a level 13 mystic cultivator." "Forget it. You'll do." Che Ruman arrogantly raised her chin and said, "But I'll say the ugly words first. Don't drag our team down at all times. Otherwise, I won't let you off." "Ah, I know, honorable miss." That wretched man bent his back and bowed with a smile. Chapter 1624. Just like that, Che Ruman's team was formed. This was the first 5-person adventure team that was successfully formed. The stocky Li Qian domineeringly wrapped his bare paw around Che Ruman's slender waist and brought her to the periphery of the crowd. He arrogantly looked at the other people who were still forming teams and sneered, a mob. Fatty, why don't you go and form a team with someone else? You won't be able to form a team with two people who don't seem to have any cultivation, Qi Xianxian suggested with a grin. Not going. Little Fatty shook his head resolutely and said, we came here as a team. Do I, Fatty, look like someone who doesn't value loyalty? You guys bring me to the summit, and I'll protect you guys so that we can successfully complete the entrance test. Nobody will look down on each other. Furthermore, how low could the cultivation of a person who possessed the ancient phoenix beast be? He really didn't know if those people had brains. People who could form a contract with a mystic beast had to be at least a level 10 mystic cultivator, alright? Why didn't they have any cultivation? He reckoned that it was just a smokescreen from these two little girls. Only then did Qi Xianxian smile from the bottom of her heart. She patted Fatty's shoulder and said, not bad, Fatty. I, Qi Xianxian, will befriend you. Fatty chuckled mischievously. Arbor, who was standing silently at the side, was expressionless, but his heart inexplicably stirred slightly. Friend? You guys wait. I think I saw someone familiar. Qi Xianxian suddenly ran out of the crowd after saying that. Like a gust of wind, she swept past everyone at an incomparably fast speed, startling everyone who was busy forming teams. Fuck, how could a woman who didn't seem to have any cultivation be so fast? Stop right there. Qi Xianxian pounced on a person's back like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. She raised her fist and ruthlessly smashed it down. Io. That person, who was wrapped in a black cloak, hugged his head and scurried away like a rat as he cried out in alarm. Fuck, it's you. Little Fatty also recognized him. With a roar, he quickly jumped over. His speed was more than twice that of Qi Xuanxuan's. He was so fast that he was almost like a nimble ball. He leaped to the side of the man in the black cape in an instant, and his fists rained down on the man's head. How dare you sell me a fake map and make me walk so far in vain? You brat. Hand over my 10 spirit coins. You've got the wrong person. I don't know you guys at all. What fake map? The cloaked man shouted in a muffled voice. Teacher, save me. Instructor Wei Wei, who was watching from the sidelines, continued to remain silent. Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty's fists landed on the black-caped man's body. Hearing this, Qi Xianxian's fist paused. She turned to look at Little Fatty in astonishment. With an incredulous expression on her face, she asked, are you serious? You spent 10 spirit coins to buy that lousy map? Little Fatty's fists continued to land. He turned his head and looked at Qi Xianxian. Aren't you? How much did you spend? I spent 1 spirit coin. Qi Xianxian covered her face. Little Fatty was instantly enraged. His fists rained down on the black-caped man's face as though they were free. Fuck, you stinky brat, how dare you treat me like this? What's the matter? Do you think I'm easy to fool just because I'm a man? Arbor didn't know why, but he had the urge to laugh. Chapter 1625. Rip, rip, rip. Qi Xianxian simply tore off the guy's black cloak. Who knew that the guy was only wearing a pair of nondescript shorts? When she tore off his cloak, his tender skin and 2 white legs were exposed. Ah, you pervert. Qi Xianxian held her face and screamed. She kept kicking the man whose cloak had been ripped off. The man in the black cloak lay on the ground with tears streaming down his face. Please, big sister, who tore off my cloak? Who made me expose my body? How dare you call me a pervert? She's the pervert, her whole family are perverts. Stop hitting me, stop hitting you too. The man in the black cloak wailed. I'm not a pervert, I'm your senior brother from year 2. Ah, 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 ah. It hurts so much. Stop hitting me. I am Mata, your senior brother from year 2. Little Fatty pulled Qi Xianxian over and looked suspiciously at the man who was lying on the ground with a bump on his head. You're from year 2. Oh my God, the two of you are too ruthless. The senior brother from year 2, whose legs were exposed and whose shorts were tattered by Little Fatty, stood up. Actually, the guy was supposed to be quite handsome, but his face was swollen by Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian, and his original appearance could not be seen. Teacher, he sold us a fake map. Qi Xianxian shouted angrily at Instructor Wei Wei, a student from your academy sold us a fake map. What fake map? How can that map be fake? Mata shouted, unconvinced. It's obviously a real map, you just don't know how to read it. Arbor walked up quickly and tugged at Qi Xuanxuan's little paw. Qi Xianxian was so angry that she did not notice her actions. She turned her head and shouted at Instructor Wei Wei, Teacher, aren't you going to do something about it? Ma Ta was selling the map in Anka City under the Academy's instructions. Wei Wei said calmly, the fact that you were tricked can only mean one thing. You're too stupid. You. Qi Xianxian was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She turned around and saw Mata, whose face was bruised and swollen, and laughed wretchedly. She was so angry that she kicked him. This time, Mata dodged. He patted his chest and shouted, Hey, little girl. You're so young, but your kicks are so fucking vicious. If I get kicked by your bloodline-ending kick, will there still be any happiness left in my life? Let me remind you that once the incense stick's time is up and you fail to form a team, you will be disqualified from the entrance test, Wei Wei said coldly. What? You're clearly picking on me. Qi Xianxian said angrily. Everyone will be treated equally. Qi Xianxian was so angry that her cheeks were puffed up. She turned her head and saw Mata smiling wretchedly. She raised her fist and rushed forward. You. Join our team. If you don't agree, I'll beat you to death. Everyone was stunned. Fuck, you can team up like this? Little Fatty secretly clenched his fists and praised, Xianxian, well done. Pull the map seller into the team, and beat him up if he doesn't like you. Perfect. Arbor's mouth twitched. She looked helplessly at her two unreliable teammates. Why did she feel that her team would turn into a team of clowns? Don't hit me. Please don't hit me. Chapter 1626. I'll join. Ah. Mata squatted to the side, holding his head pitifully as he cried out repeatedly. At least you know what's good for you. Qi Xianxian put her hands on her hips and shouted angrily. That works too. Some students who had yet to form a team angrily turned to look at Wei Wei. Teacher. He's a second-year senior. This kind of team formation doesn't conform to the rules. If you can also find a second or third-year senior to help you. Wei Wei said coldly. Those people immediately quieted down. What a joke, where would they find a second or third-year senior? Probably only an idiot like the black-cloaked man would sneak out to watch the show and get caught. However, looking at the black-cloaked man, he couldn't even defeat a girl with no cultivation. His cultivation definitely wasn't that high. No wonder he could only stay in the academy and could only stay in the second grade forever. He still hadn't graduated. The rest of the people hurriedly went around to form teams. Xiao Mu's group of 4 stood together, and their gazes swept past the group of repulsive people on the field. Looks like you have to find a support. Ma Ta took out a black robe from his inner world and wrapped himself in it. He then pretended to be a dog as he stood next to Xiao Mu and told them with a grin. No need. Qi Xianxian snorted coldly. Our team already has a support. Oh. Mata was slightly startled. He just smiled and didn't say anything else. Countdown of 5 minutes. Wei Wei reminded coldly, his face expressionless. Some of the people who had yet to form a team started to panic. They casually asked others if they wanted a support and quickly formed a team. Groups of 5 formed and stood beside Che Rumen one after another. Arbor frowned. At this time, there was basically no time to choose a team. The remaining people hurriedly came forward, wanting to join Arbor's team. Scram! Qi Xianxian shouted coldly. Didn't you say that you don't welcome us? Why are you trying to rely on us now? Do you have any shame? Where's your shame? Where's your shame? Arbor smirked and didn't say anything. Hey, little girl, don't let your emotions affect your decisions. There was less than a minute left. If they didn't hurry up and form a team, they would fail. Then, Instructor Wei Wei will make you roll down the mountain. Mata chuckled. Why don't you give us a demonstration? Little Fatty turned his head and said. Fuck. What if we can't chat happily? Half a minute left. Have you all formed a team? Wei Wei's cold gaze fell on Arbor's group, and he laughed mockingly. A person can be arrogant, but they can't be too arrogant. You can't even form a basic team of 5. It's obvious that you don't have the ability to work together as a team, much less the ability to rally and organize. If you set your sights too high, your team will ultimately fail. Duanmu Qing, apothecary, join the team. All 5 of you are here. A cold voice traveled through the crowd into the ears of Arbor and the others. Following everyone's gaze, a tall young man slowly walked over. He wore a white shirt, and his black hair was only tied up with a hairband. He looked to be 19 years old, and his facial features were well defined as if they were carved by a knife. A pair of dark eyes emitted an icy chill, as deep as a cold ancient well, without any ripples. Arbor was practically glaring, his gaze locked onto the person who walked over. Chapter 1627. At that moment, she felt dizzy. There seemed to be some messy and impure images pouring into her mind. In the dark dungeon, a pair of expectant black eyes stared at her through a small window the size of a palm. He murmured, Chow chow, chow chow, hang in there, don't die. Live. Live with me. Brother Qing, it's so painful to live. Brother Qing, I can't hold on anymore. No, you have to hold on. Xiao Xiao, master has already left me. You can't die. You have to live with me. We can definitely live. Jojo, there will be hope as long as you live. Their gazes met across the air, and their gazes met. At that moment, Duanmu Qing was slightly taken aback. His black eyes revealed some doubt as he stared deeply at Arbor. Arbor vaguely saw a patch of blood stained by red candles. There were several corpses lying on the ground in the bridal chamber. Pairs of horrified eyes stared fixedly at her, full of accusation. It was as if she was the main culprit. Brother Qing, don't worry about me. Hurry up and leave, he's coming. Hurry up. Arbor only saw a patch of scarlet in front of her eyes. In a daze, she seemed to see a beautiful woman running wildly out of the room. That face, that familiar face. Xiao Mu froze in place in shock, simply unable to believe the hazy scene before her eyes. Impossible. How could she stand up in her previous life? Wasn't she crippled and paralyzed all this time? When did she stand up? What was going on in the bridal chamber? What was going on in front of her eyes? Impossible, she had already killed Qin Xian. She had already gotten rid of her inner demons. She should have remembered everything from her previous life. It was impossible for her to forget. Impossible. Arbor suddenly turned around and flew towards the mountain peak in the distance. Jojo? Qi Xianxian was stunned. She grabbed Duan Muqing, who was still in a daze, and shouted at Instructor Wei Wei, "The 5 of us are here. We'll come over later." After saying that, he hurriedly chased in the direction of Arbor. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They really couldn't figure out how these 2 little girls, who seemed to have no cultivation at all, could be so fast. Could it be that they had collectively misjudged him? Instructor Wei Wei didn't make things difficult for them. He only glanced coldly in the direction of Arbor where Qi Xianxian and Qi Xianxian had left. He turned his gaze to the remaining 3 people on the field. You can't even form a 5-man team. It shows how useless you are. It is not suitable for you to continue staying here. I will arrange for someone to send you down the mountain. The 3 unlucky bastards immediately howled, one louder than the other. Why should we go down the mountain? Instructor, this isn't fair. There are only 3 of us in the first place. Where are we supposed to find 5 people? It's those 2 senior brothers who broke the rules. The rules didn't specify that we can't invite senior brothers to join the team. Instructor Wei Wei glanced coldly at the 3 of them. It's you who are too weak. Go down the mountain immediately. What kind of lousy academy is this? What kind of lousy examination rules are this? One of the 3 immediately cursed with hatred in his heart. Who wants to study here? We can enter Star Splendor Academy or Dawn Academy with some spirit coins. They are after all one of the 4 great academies. The 6th watch ended. Chapter 1628. Instructor Wei Wei coldly glanced at the 3 of them. Forgive me for not seeing you off. Wei Wei had seen a lot of this kind of sour grapes mentality. The academy's recruitment policy was different from the so-called 4 great academies. If they thought that the top academies were the same as trash academies like Sun Moon Star Academy, then they should get lost early. Humph. The 3 of them left in a huff, glaring angrily at Wei Wei before leaving. They were disinclined to continue staying in such an unreasonable academy. One of them turned around and sneered at the students who had formed their teams. Don't think that you can enter this trash academy just because you formed a team. Who knows how many people can come out of the depths of the lava mountain range? That's right, your mystic senses have been sealed. You can't summon mystic beasts or move items in your inner worlds. Ha ha ha. I wish you all good luck. With that, the 3 of them slipped down the mountain. They left behind a group of students who had formed their teams but were still fearful. They looked at each other, and the uneasiness in their hearts increased slightly. The words of the people who left were not completely unreasonable. Deep into the heart of the lava mountain range was a dangerous place, but they couldn't summon mystic beasts or move items in their inner worlds. Wouldn't that make it difficult for them to move? Che Rumen chuckled. It's just a mere lava mountain range. Even if we don't use mystic senses, it won't be a problem for us. Wei Wei said, now, other than them, all the assistants in your team, step forward. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. The monkey-cheeked man in Che Rumen's team smiled slyly. Why don't they use it? Because Duan Muqing is a 3rd-year student of the academy. He is a pharmacist. As academy instructors, we are very clear about the efficacy of the medicine. Wei Wei said coldly. The monkey-cheeked man pursed his lips and walked out of the team to release the medicinal efficacy in his body. I clearly released it just now. Wouldn't releasing it again consume the medicinal efficacy? What if we encounter danger and I don't have enough medicinal efficacy? Instructor, this isn't too good. Che Rumen curled her lips into a disdainful smile. She wouldn't place her hopes on such an unreliable teammate with a monkey-cheeked mouth. She arranged for him to join the team only because his special ability was an indispensable part of the team. Let him heal me. Heh, don't joke around. How could she put her precious life in the hands of an unfamiliar teammate? You Your 3 teams are not qualified. All of you are to leave the mountain. What? The members of the 3 teams who were named could not help but turn pale with fright. You call yourselves doctors. Yet, he didn't even know how to bandage a wound. How could he pretend to be a doctor when he was all wrapped up in a mess? Go down the mountain. The group that had been tricked by the 3 people who had pretended to be doctors immediately became noisy. Then let's form a new team. All of you, go down the mountain. Damn it! This is too unfair. Why must we have a useless doctor by our side? Yes. We don't need any assistance to pass the entrance test. These are the rules. Wei Wei coldly glanced at the 3 teams that were protesting. An hour ago, I already made it clear to you. It's you who didn't follow the rules. You deserve to be eliminated. Damn it! Who wants to stay here? The members of the 3 teams flew into a rage out of humiliation. Chapter 1629. Let's go. Looking at the environment of this lousy academy, it won't be good to stay here and eat. That's right, let's go. If this place doesn't want us, there will be a place for us. Humph. Humph. After another group of people left while cursing, the scene fell into silence. I'll give you an hour to pack your luggage. When we officially enter the lava mountain range, I will seal all of your mystic senses. At that time, not only will your mystic beasts be unusable, your inner worlds will also be unusable, Wei Wei said coldly. It's not too late to back out now. After entering the depths of the lava mountain range, whether you live or die will depend on your own efforts. I won't help you. TSK. Che Rumen looked away in disdain. She didn't believe it. If they encountered that kind of life and death crisis, would the instructors of a top academy look on coldly and not lend a hand? Did they not want the academy's reputation anymore? Even if you encounter a large mystic beast or even a spirit beast, I won't help you. Think about it yourself. If you want to back out, do it now. When Wei Wei's voice fell, the 23 teams on the field, except for Little Fatty and the other 2, let out a burst of curses. Every team member looked at each other nervously and hurriedly discussed a few words in secret. In the end, they clenched their teeth and persevered. After all, they had already come this far, how could they not give it their all? Besides, almost everyone had the same thought as Che Rumen. They felt that if they encountered an extremely large spirit beast that they really couldn't deal with, the instructors would definitely not stand by and watch. Since no one backs out, then we'll set off in an hour. Wei Wei coldly glanced at Little Fatty, Mata, and Duan Muqing. Time is of the essence. This was a warning to the 3 of them. After all, their team was the only one on the field, and 2 of their teammates had disappeared. Arbor leaped up to a nearby empty mountain peak at lightning speed. With a furious roar, the water spirit in her hand gathered into a long whip and swept across half the mountain peak. In an instant, the scarlet boulder in front of her was smashed into pieces. Impossible. How could she have forgotten something? This was impossible. She clearly remembered everything. She clearly. Arbor held the water spirit whip and stared blankly at the mountain wall in front of him. It was as if a yellowed ancient scroll painting had appeared on the mountain wall, and the figure on the scroll was constantly flashing. If you want to kill Brother Qing, you'll have to kill me first. You call him Brother Qing. You and I have been together for so long, do you know my name? Arbor knew all too well about the man in front of him, who was wearing a wedding robe and holding a sword. His handsome face was cold and his eyes emitted a dark green light. Wasn't it Qin Xan? The blood in her body almost froze in an instant. Impossible. 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 How could she possibly marry Qin Xan? There was no such thing in his memory. Impossible. I remembered wrongly, I remembered wrongly, I remembered wrongly. He must have remembered wrongly. She squatted down and hugged herself into a ball, trembling. She saw the ancient scroll painting on the mountain wall. Qin Xian, who was wearing a red wedding dress, was thrusting the sword in her hand into a man's body. Arbor held her head and didn't dare to look anymore. She didn't dare to look into those ruthless eyes. She just squatted there and hugged herself into a ball. Chapter 1630. In her daze, she seemed to hear someone talking beside her. My name is Duan Wuqing. I don't remember how old I am anymore. What about you? My name is Arbor. I'm 20 years old. How long have you been locked up here? I don't remember. I was only 19 when I came in. Now, I don't know how many years have passed. It should have been 4 to 5 years. Duan Wuqing let out a long sigh and said, actually, I've always lived in darkness. After a long time, I don't have to worry about never seeing the light again. Jojo, do you still remember what the starry sky looks like? If I can get out. I must spend 3 days and 3 nights to take a good look at the distant starry sky. Jojo, can you promise me one thing? Don't die before me. It's really too hard to stay in the dark alone. Arbor squatted on the ground. Unknowingly, her face was covered in tears. She felt that she might have remembered. Duan Wuqing. Duan Wuqing. He was one of the 2 pharmacists who were locked up in the dungeon with her and were studied by Fan Qiuhe all day long. It's him, it's him. What was going on? Impossible. She had never seen the 2 pharmacists who were equally miserable in her memory. Impossible, impossible. She didn't know the pharmacist called Duan Wuqing at all. She didn't know that when she was carried out of the dungeon by Qin Xian, she hadn't heard any movements from the 2 pharmacists for a long, long time. The pharmacists should have died long ago. Why did they appear by her side afterward? So scary, so chaotic. Why was she standing in the same wedding room as Qin Xian? Impossible, impossible, impossible. She couldn't have agreed to marry Qin Xian. Her mind was in a mess. It was blurry and even filled with horror and fear. Master. Little Treant jumped out of Paradise Planet in a panic. Little Soil and Little Water also jumped out with it. The 3 little ones rubbed against her legs and looked at her anxiously. Master, Master, what's wrong? Jojo, Jojo. Qi Xianxian, who had chased after her, ran over from afar. When he saw everything clearly, he couldn't help but be shocked. Damn, this side of the mountain was almost flattened. Could it be? Qi Xianxian looked at Arbor in shock. She didn't have time to think about how this guy could be so strong. She quickly ran over and threw herself at Arbor. She reached out and hugged him tightly. Jojo. What happened? Tell me. I'll follow you. After being yelled at by this loud voice, the blurry scene in front of his eyes really receded like the tide, and there were no more flickering lights or passing shadows. Without Duan Wuqing, without the terrifying Qin Xian, without the blood-red color of the corpses on the ground. Qi Xianxian looked at her anxiously. Arbor's eyes turned slightly red, and he could not hide the fear in his heart. He suddenly reached out and hugged Qi Xianxian, and he cried out emotionally, Xianxian, I miss Mo Lian, I miss my mother, I miss Master. I want to go home. This terrible feeling was too uncomfortable to bear. It made one's heart palpitate and panic. She originally thought that she had solved all the mysteries of her previous life. She remembered everything, and she even personally solved her inner demon. She killed Qin Xian, and everything was over. It was like a person who had been trapped in a maze for 3 days and 3 nights. He finally saw the light and thought that he was about to walk out of the maze. Chapter 1631. However, behind the light was an abyss, an even more vast labyrinth. This made her powerful heart start to crack. She also couldn't endure this endless torment. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Don't worry. I will definitely help you. I will definitely stand on your side. Qi Xianxian said as if she was making a vow. Little Fatty will too. Don't worry, little Fatty, and I will help you. Arbor turned to look at Qi Xianxian. She looked at her pitifully, sniffled and said, Xianxian, my shoulder hurts from your arm pressing on it. Qi Xianxian retracted her chubby hand awkwardly and laughed foolishly at her. She pulled her up and said, Jojo, don't worry. I'm here for you. Speaking of which, just now. You ran away because you saw Duan Muqing. Did you know him before? Arbor paused and shook her head. I don't know him. Duan Muqing seems to be the most reliable person in our team. When Qi Xianxian said this, she realized that Arbor was looking at her. She quickly laughed and said, haha, of course, except for you. Arbor snorted and looked at her. When you came out, did that troublesome teacher say anything? Qi Xuanxuan's expression changed. She slapped her thigh and said, yes, we have to go back quickly. That troublesome teacher might find trouble with us again. Gurgle. Qi Xianxian almost stepped on Little Water Droplet. She quickly retracted her foot and looked at Little Water Droplet, Little Soil, and Little Trayant standing in a row beside Arbor's foot. This? What are these? Arbor lowered her arms slightly. Little Water Droplet, Little Soil, and Little Trayant jumped onto her arm at the same time and climbed up. Arbor held the three little fellows and said to Qi Xianxian, who was in a daze, get to know each other. Little Water, Little Soil, and Little Trayant. This is the secret of how I comprehended the water and earth spirits. This is holy water, and this is holy land. Qi Xianxian couldn't control her shocked expression for a moment, and her jaw seemed to have dropped. Ugh! Qi Xianxian hurriedly held her small chin and swallowed her saliva. She stared at Little Water and Little Earth with sparkling eyes and said, wow, so this is the holy earth and holy water of our five spirit origins. Let me see, let me see. Ouch! Qi Xuanxuan's outstretched hand was gently whipped by the holy water. She quickly retracted her hand. Humph, don't touch my lady holy water. The little guy turned into a little water baby and roared at Qi Xianxian with its arms akimbo. Then, it crawled all the way to Arbor's arm. Don't mess around. Arbor touched the water helplessly. Master, don't be sad. I'm not sad. She was just a little confused about her past life. She couldn't accept the sudden influx of dusty memories. That was why she couldn't accept it all at once. Master, you have Dian here. Me too, me too. And Little Soil, Little Soil. The lump of soil was unwilling to be left behind and continued to climb up. As expected of holy water and holy earth. They were both so noisy. Qi Xianxian sighed. She hurriedly turned to Arbor and said, what other abilities do you have to hide from me? Tell me everything in one go so that my heart won't be shocked and frightened all day long. It's too scary. Arbor's mood became better after being cheered up by this fellow. Chapter 1632. Arbor seriously considered Qi Xuanxuan's words. She tilted her head in thought and said, actually, the pills I sold last time were all made by me. My alchemist teacher has already passed away. Qi Xuanxuan's small mouth gaped into an O shape. By the time the two returned to the field hand in hand, almost everyone had finished their preparations and gathered in front of the mountain peak. The little fatty involuntarily sighed in relief when he saw the two little girls return. He hastily ran up and sized up Arbor. Seeing that she didn't have any injuries other than her slightly reddened eyes, he exclaimed softly, you scared me to death. Where did you two run off to? They're going to set off in 5 minutes. That old stoic said that if you two don't return in 5 minutes, it'll be considered our team's forfeit. He said we automatically forfeited the entrance test, damn it. When the little stoic and Qi Xian heard the little fatty say the 3 words, old stoic, they simultaneously killed him with their gazes. The little fatty instantly realized that he seemed to have used the wrong words. He hastily laughed awkwardly and coughed to cover it up. Ahem, luckily you two came back. Our team is all here, so there's no harm in everyone getting to know each other. While the little fatty and Qi Xian were talking to Arbor, Duan Wuqing only felt his gaze uncontrollably land on that aloof little stoic's face. It was as if that little stoic face was like a magnet, deeply attracting his gaze. Duan Wuqing reflexively reached out to press his chest and felt his heartbeat inexplicably accelerate. He moved his lips and suddenly wanted to go up and say a few words to the little stoic, but he abruptly realized that the little stoic's gaze had never landed on him from beginning to end. Hello everyone, I'm Ma Ta. Ma Ta jumped out first and waved at everyone. The little fatty and Qi Xian extended their fists at him at the same time. Ma Ta hastily raised both his hands and said with a mischievous grin, don't hit. If I didn't inform senior brother Duanmu to come help at the last minute, you guys would have been kicked out of the academy because you couldn't gather enough people. Qi Xian was startled. So this guy invited helpers. She looked Mata up and down and snorted. At least you have some conscience. He. Mata clasped his hands together and bowed to Qi Xian. Take it as my apology to you. My name is. Qi Xuan's words were abruptly interrupted by Instructor Wei Wei. Is everything ready? Wei Wei walked out of a stone house. Let me remind you again. Prepare enough water bags. Otherwise, you will regret entering the depths of the lava mountain range. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Quite a number of people in the group hurriedly turned around and ran towards the academy's pond, intending to carry more water on their backs in case of an emergency. Qi Xian couldn't help but feel anxious. She turned to look at Arbor and asked, what should we do? We didn't prepare any water bags. Don't worry, Arbor and Fatty said in unison. Arbor was very clear that the things in her paradise star didn't need to be stored with profound sense at all. There was plenty of food and water on Paradise Star, as much as she wanted. As for mystic beasts, that was even more laughable. All of her beasts roamed around Paradise Star, unlike other people who needed to use profound sense to open their mystic beast spaces to release their mystic beasts. Chapter 1633. Therefore, these so-called restrictions were completely useless to Arbor. She had a divine cheating tool, Paradise Planet. Arbor turned to look at the little fatty who spoke. The little fatty took off his outer robe, revealing a circle of water sacks of various sizes hanging around his waist. He smiled at the 2 girls in a simple and honest manner. Don't worry, I packed a lot of water for you guys. It'll definitely be enough to eat when we enter the lava mountain range. Arbor's gaze relaxed, and Qi Xian was so happy that she jumped up and punched the little fatty's shoulder. Fatty, is it heavy? Why don't you give us a few sacks to carry? This bit of water is nothing. The little fatty put on his outer robe again. I'll give you the water after we enter the lava mountain range. I'll hold it for you guys first. Tisk, little fatty is really considerate. Whoever becomes your wife in the future will definitely be very happy. As they spoke, the person who ran to fill the water sacks again hastily ran back. Many people scrambled to borrow a few more water sacks from the academy. However, Wei Wei swept a cold glance over them and said indifferently, time's up. Anguished wails came from the students on the mountain peak. Some people looked at the 2 small water sacks hanging around their waists with faint worry in their eyes. They felt that this instructor Wei Wei definitely wouldn't deliberately frighten them. Entering the mountain range without enough water might really be a suicidal act. They felt a bit panicked. What was going on? Before we set off, each team member, show me your cultivation and mystic energy. Don't hide your strength. Let me know where your true strength lies. Show me your mystic beasts. If I discover that you summoned your mystic beasts during the test, it will be considered cheating and your qualifications to take the test will be revoked. Wei Wei turned to look at the strongest team and pointed at Che Rumen. We'll start with your team. Che Rumen had a smile on her face as she raised her beautiful chin high with a proud expression. She reached out and circled a bean-sized flame. Che Rumen, 18 years old, peak level, 15 mystic cultivator, comprehended the 6th level of spiritual fire. Peng Guang, 25 years old, initial level, 14 mystic cultivator, has yet to fully comprehend spiritual water. Zhu Bozong, 22 years old, level, 14 mystic cultivator, comprehended the 5th level of spiritual water. Li Qian, 28 years old, level 1 soul master, level 5 spiritual fire. As Che Rumen's team members revealed their strength one by one and summoned their Xian beasts at the same time, everyone present looked at them enviously. As expected, it was the strongest team. In the team, only that wretched man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks was a level 13 mystic cultivator. He had only grasped the edge of spiritual energy comprehension and had yet to fully comprehend it. Among the other 4 people, 3 of them had actually comprehended the 5th level of spirit power. As for the captain, Che Rumen, she was even more talented. She had actually comprehended the 6th level of spirit fire. Those who could comprehend more than 60% of their spiritual energy were all amazing people. This was not something that could be mentioned in the same breath. They couldn't afford to offend them. Che Rumen's team was truly worthy of the title of the strongest team. The teams revealed their cultivation base and strength one by one. Among them, there were 2 people who had comprehended the 6th level of spiritual energy, attracting the envious and jealous gazes of the crowd. Wei Wei was unmoved and only looked on coldly from the sidelines. After the last and second team revealed their cultivation base, everyone's gazes uniformly shifted to Arbor's team. Looking at Arbor's team, their gazes carried hints of watching a good show. Chapter 1634. So what if those 3 youths had extraordinary strength? What could they do when they had to bring along 2 burdens with low cultivation? TSK, once they entered the mountain, they would know that no matter how beautiful a woman was, she would still be a burden and would only bring disaster to the team. Ko Hongwen, 19 years old. Peak level, 15 mystic cultivator, level 8 earth spirit, divine beast dazzling iron armor tortoise. As soon as the announcement was made, everyone exclaimed. Divine beast, divine beast. Level 8 earth spirit. Oh my god. Level 8 earth spirit, I didn't hear wrongly, right? Under the clamor, Qi Xianxian, Arbor, and the other 2 spoke indifferently one after another. Qi Xianxian, 15 years old. Peak level, 13 mystic cultivator, level 8 spirit lightning, divine beast golden-furred lion. Qi Xuanxuan's body trembled as a powerful mystic energy erupted from her hands. Everyone was dumbfounded. Arbor, 15 years old. Initial level, 15 mystic cultivator, level 9 spirit water, divine beast ancient bloodfire phoenix. Mata, 19 years old. Initial level, 1 mystic cultivator, level 8 spirit water, divine beast. Duanmu Qing, 19 years old. Peak level, 3 mystic cultivator, level 9 spirit wood, divine beast. Arbor, Mata, and Duanmu Qing spoke almost at the same time, their voices intertwined. Everyone could only hear level 9, level 8, level 9 and divine beast, divine beast, divine beast. They had completely forgotten how to adjust their facial expressions. Why did such a terrifying species like geniuses exist in this world? What did these so-called geniuses eat to grow up? Didn't they think that summoning divine beasts one by one to scare them was a very immoral and terrifying thing? Also, the power of the 5 spirits that were commonly comprehended in this world were all below level 6. This team was all at level 8 or 9 of the 5 spirits. What did this mean? As Arbor, Ma Ta, and Duanmuqing released their cultivation and summoned their divine beasts one after another, a trace of spirit energy appeared in their hands. The entire place was practically silent. Screech. The cry of a phoenix was heard. Wei Wei's eyelids twitched. You don't have to summon your ancient bloodfire phoenix. I know. You know. No, you don't know. The ancient bloodblaze phoenix is just one of the saint beasts by my side. Xiao Mu pulled back her hand, but she didn't summon the phoenix. Instead, she faintly swept her gaze over the shocked crowd before turning to ask Wei Wei, can we set off now? Wei Wei nodded, I have a rough idea of where your strength lies. When the time comes, I will bring you to different areas to train. Do what you can. Everyone nodded with a stupefied expression. They had yet to recover from the shock. This was especially true for the people who had mocked Arbor and Qi Xianxian. Now, they felt their faces hurt. What people with no cultivation? What weak people? Their faces were slapped so hard that it hurt. What bullshit low strength, what bullshit no cultivation. 2 15-year-old girls were peak level, 13 mystic cultivators and initial level, 15 mystic cultivators respectively. Was there anything more terrifying than this? He was only 15 years old. What was even more frightening was that the average age of the Arbor team was no more than 20 years old, but they had the highest cultivation among all the idiots. There was even a 19-year-old level 3 spirit master. Why didn't such geniuses just die? Did they have to show off in front of normal people like them? See you tomorrow. Chapter 1635. It was such a huge blow to him that he even had the thought of killing himself. Che Rumen was like a wandering ghost as she slowly moved forward with the starting team. Until now, she still couldn't accept that her team was chased down from the strongest team by someone. What strongest team? It was merely a joke. Others who were stronger than them hadn't even said a word yet, but they were clowns jumping up and down, making a huge joke out of themselves. Now, Che Rumen only felt that her face was burning red. She really wanted to turn around and curse Arbor for being an idiot. Why did she blindly hide her strength for no reason? She was clearly a level 15 initial success mystic cultivator, yet she pretended to be someone without any cultivation. Didn't she feel ashamed? However, all the cursing stopped abruptly the moment their gazes landed on that stoic face. What to do if she couldn't curse? That damn stoic face was so hateful. She really hoped that she would die in the depths of that lava mountain range later. Che Rumen thought maliciously in her heart. She pulled her gaze away from Arbor and looked up at the stocky Li Qian. Do you have the confidence to take first place? Li Qian furrowed his brows. That 15-year-old girl is called Arbor, right? Her team probably isn't easy to deal with. There are also 2 seniors helping them. We probably can't take first place, but second place shouldn't be a problem. I don't want to be second. Che Rumen nearly screamed. I, Che Rumen, would rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. I just want to be first. I want our team to be the first in the test. When Li Qian heard that, he looked down at Che Rumen and chuckled as he reached out to hug that woman's slender waist. He said with a smile, what's the rush? The competition hasn't started yet, right? It's not impossible for you to take first place. I think that team is also made up of little girls and young boys. Their average age isn't over 20, so they definitely don't have much combat experience. They're just born in an aristocratic family and have unusually high talent. If we secretly use some tricks, we might be able to take first place. Li Qian reached out his hand and secretly touched Che's delicate butt. He grinned and said, but if I help you this time, you have to promise to let me change to another prop. Che Rumen couldn't help but tremble when she heard this. Thinking of Li Qian, that pervert, trying several props on her body, she suddenly felt her body tighten. However, she couldn't offend this level 1 spiritual master for the time being. She still had to rely on him. Che Rumen gave a tender laugh, raised her hand and touched Li Qian's chest. "You dead ghost, thinking about that all day long. As long as you help me get first place, I'll do whatever you want." "Hee hee. Isn't that because you're such a cute little thing?" Li Qian laughed. The two of them mingled at the back of the group, walking forward while holding each other's arms. However, after the two of them flirted with each other for a while, they felt waves of heat rolling in. The surrounding air began to rise in temperature, and it was unbearably hot. The two of them quickly separated. Che Rumen used her sleeves to wipe the sweat on her forehead and neck. She asked, "Why are you so hot?" "It's much hotter than the peak." Li Qian was so hot that his body and mind were irritated. "That's for sure." A member of the other team hurriedly nodded and interrupted, "The peak above has been cooled down by the spiritual water shield, so naturally it's different from here." Chapter 1636. Che Rumen was unbearably hot. Taking advantage of the fact that her mystic consciousness had not been sealed by the instructor, she hurriedly took out the water flask from her inner world and gulped down half of the water in one go. Hanging the remaining water flask at her waist, Che Rumen asked impatiently, "How much longer until we reach the entrance?" "We should be there soon." The team's advance slowed down. Everyone was originally walking on the winding mountain path, but now they stopped in front of a fiery red stone field. The rocks here were all roasted red, and everything that entered their eyes was bright red. Arbor stopped along with the team. You three teams will hunt 10 level 13 mystic beasts near the entrance of the red stone forest. Wei Wei said coldly, pointing at 3 of the 23 teams. Now, I will seal all of your mystic consciousness. When the time comes, you can only use your own cultivation and strength when fighting with the mystic beasts in the mountain range. Have you taken out the water and food from your inner world? I'll give you 1 more minute to prepare, hurry. Che Rumen's expression was ugly. She took out the other 2 flasks of water from her inner world and stuffed a lot of dry rations into her arms. She could not help but protest, "Instructor, the environment here is so bad, you won't let us use our inner worlds. Isn't this entrance test too harsh? Those who don't want to take the test can leave now." Wei Wei said coldly, "I've already told you the rules. It's meaningless to raise objections now." In the next second, when everyone was caught off guard, he made a move and sealed everyone's profound senses. This move made all the students spontaneously admire him. Che Rumen secretly moved her mystic consciousness. Sure enough, she could not use it. For a moment, Che Rumen's expression became extremely ugly. She really could not open her inner world. She could not help but regret not taking out the remaining 2 flasks of water from her inner world. Now she only had 2.5 flasks of water hanging on her body. Was it not a bit too little? It was too late now. Her inner world was already sealed. Looking at Instructor Wei Wei's appearance, Che Rumen could not help but feel uncertain. Could it be that what Wei Wei said was true? Even if they encountered a large spirit beast and were in a life and death situation, he would not help them. Wei Wei stretched out his hand and shook it. A heavenly Tao oath that was suffused with golden light spread out layer by layer in front of everyone like an unfolding scroll, revealing rows of crooked names on it. Now that you're here, if you still want to participate in the test, you can come forward and sign this life and death oath. If you don't want to sign, you can leave. Everyone's expression changed drastically. They weren't blind. They could clearly see what was written on the heavenly Tao oath book. The oath stated that everyone had volunteered to participate in the entrance test. In the process of the entrance exam, if one were to encounter any life or death situations, there would not be any teachers to save them. Everything depended on the cooperation of the team to win the battle. Every time a team managed to defeat 10 Xian beasts designated by their instructor, they would be able to summon their instructor and apply to leave the beast area of the lava mountain range. Those who failed to complete the task within the specified time would be deemed to have failed the test and would have to leave the mountain immediately. Everyone had willingly signed the Heavenly Tao Oath after reading it. Their life and death had nothing to do with the academy. It's just a life and death agreement. Are you going to sign it or not? If you don't sign it, you can get lost immediately. Chapter 1637. If they signed it, no one could guarantee that they would be able to survive in the lava mountain range. Immediately, a few teams retreated at the same time. To put it bluntly, the elite academy was just their second choice. Actually, most of them originally wanted to go to the 4 major academies of the Sun, Moon and Stars Academy. It was only because the other party's fees were high that they settled for the next best thing. They wanted to try their luck at the elite academy first and accumulate experience or money before going to the 4 major academies next year. What a joke, it was just an entrance test. They did not want to throw their lives away. Once this life and death agreement came out, 7 to 8 teams immediately disbanded. They looked at Instructor Wei Wei with ugly expressions and said, "Now that we are not participating in the Elite Academy's entrance test, shouldn't Instructor unseal our mystic senses?" Wei Wei glanced coldly at those few teams. "Your mystic senses will automatically be unsealed after 7 days. What he meant was that they could not unseal it now. Those people's faces instantly turned green as they glared at Wei Wei unkindly. They were so angry that they gritted their teeth. If this Wei Wei had taken out this life and death agreement for them to sign from the start, who knew how many people would still be left after entering the mountain with him? But he had to wait until he led them into the lava mountain range before telling them about this. How was this an entrance test training? It was basically a life and death battle for them. Whoever was willing could go. Excluding those people who had left, the 15 teams that were left behind, other than Arbor's team of 5 who were calm, the others' expressions were more or less stiff and ugly. Che Rumen turned to look at Xiao Mu and the others, and her eyes involuntarily flickered. These young ladies were quite courageous. Even at this time, their expressions didn't change at all. But, it was also because they were truly capable. Che Rumen glanced at Arbor's Qi Xianxian and the rest again before retracting her gaze. She walked forward and wrote her name on the scroll and stamped her own blood seal. Li Qian, Peng Guang, Zhu Bozong and the rest of Che Rumen's team also walked forward and stamped their names before silently retreating a few steps. When Xiao Mu and the others finished imitating the plan, they turned around and discovered that 2 other teams were still discussing whether to sign or not. Wei Wei's face was stiff as he suddenly took back the Heavenly Tao Oath and said coldly, "All right, those who have signed the Heavenly Tao Oath, continue to follow me." The members of the 2 hesitant teams immediately became anxious. "Instructor, we've decided to participate too. I won't wait for you if it's too late. Come early next year." Wei Wei threw these 2 sarcastic words at the members of the 2 teams, whose faces were ashen, and directly led the 13 teams into the depths of the lava mountain range. I believe that most of you who have stayed behind have a good mental endurance. Those who were eliminated with just a few words showed their cowardice at the slightest attempt. They aren't suitable for this large-scale trial at all. A large map appeared in his hand. After looking at it for a while, he said, "Everyone, follow me. The lava mountain range is divided into 3 major regions. Our main area for this trial can be called a first-class area. In other words, it's the standard hinterland of the lava mountain range. Of course, this area is considered the deepest hinterland of the lava mountain range, but actually, it's not." Chapter 1638. The true hinterland of the lava mountain range is actually only considered a Class 2 area. Wei Wei glanced aloofly at everyone and said, I'll give each team 1 minute to pass the map around and remember the approximate location. Let me remind you that with your current abilities, don't enter Class 2 and Class 3 areas. Otherwise, you won't be able to bear the consequences. The team members couldn't help but look at each other in dismay, and they reached out to take the map with their hearts in a jumble. They wanted to memorize the topographic map in their minds by rote. However, not everyone was like Mo Lien, who had a photographic memory. Even if our dear Xiao Mu saw such an enormous map, she wouldn't be able to remember everything in a short time. Arbor frowned as she turned her head to avoid looking at the map dizzily. Yet she saw Ma Ta, who was standing on the side with his arms crossed, smile vulgarly at them. You guys are in luck today. Boss Duanmu has an extremely good memory. When he was training in the lava mountain range, he once passed through the Class 2 area. He's very familiar with this place. With him leading the way, we don't have to worry about stepping into the forbidden area by mistake. Arbor saw that Duanmu Qing only glanced at the map a few times before looking away. Suddenly, he turned his head to look at her. She immediately averted her gaze, but her movements were extremely stiff. The little stoic didn't understand what the hell she was trying to avoid, and she felt a bit embarrassed. Qi Xian turned to glance at her and suddenly stepped forward to say, Instructor Wei Wei, please lead us into the area first. Wei Wei glanced at Qi Xian indifferently. You guys are the last. Qi Xian. Che Rumen snorted on the side. Just as she was about to mock them, she heard Instructor Wei Wei say, Your team's overall strength is the strongest, so it's only right that I bring you to the strongest area to hunt mystic beasts. I'm thanking your entire family. Qi Xian and the little fatty rolled their eyes at the same time. Che Rumen was about to mock them, but her words were stuck in her throat in that instant, and she held her tongue with a cold expression. All right. Wei Wei put away the map and said aloofly, Have you all looked at the map clearly? Don't blame me for not warning you again. If you accidentally step into a second-class area, you might not even have a corpse left. Instructor, are there any powerful Xian beasts in the second and third categories? Profound beast? Wei Wei sneered, the second category region has a 1,000-year-old divine beast overseeing it. As for the third category region, Wei Wei purposely turned to look at Arbor and said to her, Although your ancient Bloodfire Phoenix is a holy beast, it is only a young beast now. Don't show off in the third-class area, or you'll regret it. From the very beginning, Xiao Mu had sensed the prickly feeling coming from this instructor Wei Wei. When she heard what he said, she turned her head and looked at him seriously. Are you okay with this? Is there something wrong with his brain? Don't you remember that you sealed everyone's profound senses just now? Instructor, after one's profound sense is sealed, they won't be able to summon their contracted beasts. Qi Xian added in a lukewarm tone. Instructor Wei Wei's cold expression stiffened slightly, then he turned his head and snorted. Let's go. Arbor's group silently followed the group. Actually, after several rounds of selection, there were only 13 teams, including Arbor's team, that were willing to continue the test. Chapter 1639. And out of these 13 teams, who would be able to make it out of the lava mountain range in the end? No one could say for sure how many teams there would be. Don't think that the Type 1 area that Instructor Wei Wei mentioned was small. In fact, each area was at least tens of thousands of square kilometers. Therefore, Arbor and the other teams were brought to the Type 1 area. Almost every team was separated by a large distance, and it would be impossible for them to bump into each other within 4 to 6 hours. Every team was thrown into their own small area to complete their mission. After Wei Wei finally left Arbor and the other 4 behind, he glanced at them coldly and said, Every year, the Elite Academy will only accept 5 students. I hope that after 7 days, you will still be a complete team. I forgot to tell you that if someone dies in your team, it means that your teamwork is not good enough. At that time, the remaining few of you will not have the qualifications to pass the entrance test. Of course, this is only for you, you and you. The three of you. Instructor Wei Wei pointed at Xiao Mu, the little fatty, and Qi Xianxian as he said coldly, after all, there are already 2 students from top academies in your team. After saying this, Instructor Wei Wei left quickly. Even the last few words that he said to them were filled with mockery and sarcasm. Arbor frowned and stared at Instructor Wei Wei's back as he left. Qi Xianxian could not help but laugh. This instructor is really funny. Since we stepped into the lava mountain range, he has been mocking and ridiculing us until now. Isn't he tired of it? Mata hurriedly said, actually, Instructor Wei Wei is still very serious and responsible. He is just a little. Qi Xianxian glared at him fiercely, shut up. You and that idiot instructor are on the same side. Anyway, this trial will not affect you at all. If you want to quit, then do it as soon as possible. Miss Qi, what are you saying? Since we have promised to help you pass the entrance test, we will naturally not give up on you halfway. Mata's ears twitched as he said this. He turned his head to look at a few red-skinned, sharp-fanged foxes that suddenly appeared from behind a pile of crimson-red rocks. He suddenly conjured a few streams of water spirit energy and threw them in their direction. Go! Duanmu Qing gave a low shout, and the 4 of them immediately ran in his direction. Then, they quickly jumped and dodged on the rocks, avoiding the red-skinned, sharp-fanged foxes. This group of red-skinned, fanged foxes surged out from all directions. As their numbers increased, the expressions of Duanmu Qing and the others also started to turn serious. The little fox in the lead stared at Arbor and the others with its small red eyes. It suddenly jumped up and was about to pounce and bite Arbor's calf. Suddenly, a fluffy white tail smashed into the little fox's head. With a loud bang, the red-skinned, sharp-fanged fox that was trying to bite Arbor's calf was smashed into pieces by a large, furry tail. Duanmu Qing and the others turned to look and could not help but be slightly stunned. Beside Arbor, a little fat squirrel had appeared out of nowhere. It stuck out its little belly and was moving quickly beside Arbor's leg. Wherever it passed, no matter how sharp-tongued the little foxes were, they were all turned into ghosts under the tail. Xian, let me introduce you. This is my second contracted beast other than the ancient bloodfire phoenix. It is called Chirp Chirp Chirp. Chapter 1640. Qi Xuanxuan's wooden face did not have much expression. Instead, it was the little fatty who cried out in surprise, "What the hell? Aren't you cheating, Jojo?" "Huh, but I like it. That whatever teacher, he thought that you would be at your wit's end after he sealed your phoenix. Who would have thought that, haha. You even have a squirrel by your side." When the fatty said this, he suddenly paused and frowned. "Why do I remember that before the ancient bloodfire phoenix, you seem to have summoned a big green bird? She also has a little white snake." Qi Xianxian said woodenly, her face still maintaining a calm expression. Arbor glanced at them. "Let's break out of the encirclement before these red-skinned foxes surround us." Everyone responded and ran wildly, jumping up and down all kinds of strange rocks. Not long after, they left the group of red-skinned foxes far behind. Originally, after their leader was killed by the little fat squirrel's tail, the foxes had somewhat given up. Now that they saw the humans running away so quickly, they immediately lost interest in chasing them. A portion of them pretended to chase for a few hundred miles before they retreated. They cried out a few times and ran away with their tails between their legs. Qi Xianxian heaved a sigh of relief. These red-skinned fanged foxes are quite fast. They suddenly rushed out from behind the rocks. If not for their fast speed, they would have been surrounded by this group of little beasts. The group was chased by the foxes for a few hundred miles. After the fanged foxes left, the little fatty panted and couldn't wait to find a rock to sit on. "Oh my God, I'm so tired." Arbor glanced at him, then turned to look at the fox corpses that were scattered far away on the road they came from. "I'll go clean up." The task given to them by the instructor was to hunt and kill 10 second-grade spirit beasts. With their current cultivation, this could be considered a challenging task. Although these foxes were all level 12 or 13 mystical beasts, Arbor planned to clean up the fox corpses to see if there were any crystal cores in their bodies. At the same time, the 17-story Tower of Punishment, which was black and covered in a layer of blazing red flames, stood in an unknown space. As this space slowly drifted through the lower star zone, the 17-level Tower of Punishment would occasionally light up. Every time it flashed, the drifting spatial door would open. Sometimes, one or two unlucky fellows would be sucked in. On the 13th floor of the tower, a certain peach blossom was lazily leaning against a large round bed covered with felt. Holding a wine glass in one hand and a fruit in the other, he sighed and said, "These illusory things are illusory after all." It was tasteless in the mouth. Stingy. "Please, don't be so picky. At least you have something to eat." "What about me?" On the opposite side of the round bed, there was a row of iron chains hanging on the wall. A young man whose hands were bound by iron chains couldn't help but roll his eyes and say, "I've been hanging on this wall for 10 years, big brother." "How long have you been in here?" "They even entertained you with good food and drinks." "That's why I said that the heavenly Tao also differs from person to person." "You're just a lackey." The moment the young man finished speaking, a bolt of lightning fell from the top of his head and struck him until he was charred on the outside and tender on the inside. Chapter 1641. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's mouth twitched. His hand, which was holding the wine cup, trembled slightly. "Old man, you should stop talking. I've been here for so long, and I've watched you get struck by lightning every day. My balls hurt for you." "Who's the old man? Who's the old man?" The young man glared at the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. "You brat, don't think that you can call me an old man just because you're 1 or 2 years younger than me. When I get out, I'm going to marry 8 to 10 young wives. Don't call me that, you're making me sound old." "Hee hee, what are you two talking about? You're having a good time." A voice interrupted their conversation. "Heh, look at you. It's all because you're so annoying over there that you've attracted that woman." The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal poured himself a cup of wine leisurely and glanced at the young man hanging on the wall. "To be honest, at your age, you'd better not go out and harm other young ladies. You should just stay in the punishment realm obediently." The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smirked. He looked up and saw a woman with a large peony hairpin and red silk walking in lightly. She held a silk handkerchief in front of her face. She took a few steps forward shyly and slowly put down the silk handkerchief that covered her face. She revealed a face that was comparable to a monkey's butt. Her cheeks were red and her eyes were full of tenderness. She twisted her body and winked at the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal. The wine cup in the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's hand almost rolled off the bed that he was frightened by this woman. "You! Brother Ma Jichen, do my clothes look better than mine?" The peony walked half a circle around the bed and gently swayed her red silk dress. She raised her eyebrows and winked at the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal again. "Ha ha 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 ha." The young man hanging on the wall laughed wildly. "Peony Fairy, your face is now like a monkey's butt. Ha 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 ha, do you think it looks good or not?" "Shut up, Dao Wuji. I'm not talking to you." The Peony Fairy turned her hand, and a small hammer appeared in her hand. There was a trace of lightning power on it. The young man named Everlasting Blade didn't seem to care at all. He curled his lips and was forced to say something against his will. "In truth, peonies and peach blossoms are a perfect match." The Peony Fairy giggled. Shut up. A certain Peach Blossom's handsome face immediately darkened, and he glared angrily at the youth. Saber Wuji pursed his lips and closed his mouth unconcernedly. Since he failed to break through the tower 10 years ago, he was trapped in the 13th level of the punishment realm by the Peony Fairy with the spirit locking rope. All these years, he had been so aggrieved. Now, any random junior could order him around. Thinking back to the days when he was on Siyuan planet, he lived a life of luxury and had more than 10 wives. Compared to now, sigh. Brother Jian Chen. The Peony Fairy wriggled her body and said, "Why don't you stay with me in this punishment realm?" Jian Chen shuddered and hurriedly shook his head like a rattledrum. No, no, of course not. Just looking at this woman for an extra second was enough to sting his eyes, let alone having him stay here and face her for the rest of his life. Stop joking. Jian Chen suddenly stood up and kicked over the fruit basket on the bed. Come. The Peony Fairy's eyes lit up. Ah, I'm coming. Chapter 1642. Therefore, Yuan Shichen did not hesitate to kick the Peony Fairy who rushed forward happily. This kick carried a fierce momentum and went straight to the Peony Fairy's chest. The Peony Fairy was shocked and hurriedly jumped, dodging Yuan Shichen's sudden kick. Wow! The Peony Fairy exclaimed, frowning a pair of beautiful eyebrows, and cried discontentedly, Yuan Shichen, you actually recovered. In just a few days, this man had recovered 70% of his cultivation. It should be known that in this punishment zone, the strength of the challenger was suppressed greatly. Although it seemed that Yuan Shichen's cultivation was about the same as hers, in fact, Yuan Shichen's cultivation was at least half suppressed by the punishment tower. Moreover, this was only the 13th floor. Yuan Shichen would continue to challenge the 14th and 15th floors, and the consumption of sacred power would only increase. Moreover, under the suppression of the punishment tower, the recovery of sacred power consumed would be 10 times slower than usual. Therefore, some people were forced to stay on the first floor for a few years, or even more than 10 years, because every time after a challenge failed, the recovery period would be very slow. For example, the saber fool in front of her. From 10 years ago to now, he might have challenged no less than 100 times. Yuan Shichen, this guy, from entering the tower until now, only a month's time, but directly from the first floor to the 13th floor. These 2 days, he was stuck on the 13th floor with the Peony Fairy. But the Peony Fairy had a strange feeling in her heart. She always felt that in these 2 or 3 days, the man in front of her was afraid that she would not be able to keep him. Alas, such a good-looking man, why didn't he want to be with her? She had been single for 100 years. This Yuan Shichen, he really did not know how to be tender to the fairer sex. If he was willing to stay here, then they would be husband and wife. Then in the future, the man and woman pair would guard the 13th floor together. Let's see who could escape from the hands of the husband and wife. Sister! Sister! Hearing this excited cry, the Peony Fairy's head could not help but swell. This cry was so crisp and sharp, needless to say, it must be her twin sister guarding the 12th floor, Ginkgo Fairy, who had come. Sister! Don't come over. The Peony Fairy stood in front of Yuan Shichen, stretched out her hands in front of Yuan Shichen, and pushed her sister who jumped over. I tell you, brother-in-law can't be bullied. Big brother Ji Chen is the person that I, your sister, have taken a fancy to. Don't you dare snatch him from me. What's more, you weren't even able to keep him here for half a day. At the very least, I managed to keep him here for 7 days. I just made a mistake. Fairy Ginkgo almost drooled when she saw who Jinshen. Her elder sister, the Peony Fairy, saw her younger sister's stupid look and immediately reached out to cover her face. In fact, her younger sister, Fairy Ginkgo, was almost as strong as her. That was why one of them could guard the 12th floor and the other the 13th floor. The problem was that her sister, that pig head, was infatuated when she saw Ji Chen. Halfway through the fight, because of a close-range attack, the handsome man was right in front of her. That enlarged handsome face actually made her pig-like little sister faint. At that time, Ma Shichen looked at Fairy Ginkgo with a weird expression. After looking at her for a long while, she helplessly entered the passageway to the 13th floor. There were weirdos every year, and there were probably a lot of weirdos in the punishment realm. Chapter 1643. Although he had experienced it a long time ago, he was still troubled by those weirdos from the first floor to the 13th floor. Although there were weirdos when challenging the Tower of Punishment in the past, there were not many of them. In recent years, he felt that there were more and more weirdos in the Tower of Punishment. He wondered if it was because the old batch had been released, and the new batch had some flaws in their personalities, that he felt that the guards of the Tower of Punishment were the ones who made him feel the most helpless out of all the people he had challenged in the realm of punishment over the years. Sigh, how could he endure this? He wondered if his old friend from the 14th floor was still there. In the past, he had fought his way to the 14th floor, and after drinking a few cups with his old friend would open a back door and let him out. He wondered if he would be so lucky this year. Speechless, Ma Shichen turned his face away and swung his fan to cover half of his face. "Peony, tell your sister to stop staring at me." That look in her eyes was as if she wanted to eat him. Peony Fairy coughed lightly and tugged at her sister's sleeves. "Ginkgo, why did you come up here? Just now when you entered the door, you were still excitedly calling out for your sister. Why are your eyes all on your brother-in-law now? Who the hell is your brother-in-law?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was even more speechless. Hearing the pretty man's words, Ginkgo Fairy immediately smiled and returned to her senses. She giggled at Ma Shichen and then turned to look at her sister, Peony Fairy, and said, Sister, I heard that there's an extremely powerful challenger coming down. I heard it from Sister Poisonous Spider on the 8th floor. Oh, that man is very handsome." Ginkgo Fairy looked as if she was about to drool. She tugged at Peony Fairy and said excitedly, "I heard that this man took less than half a month to go from the 1st floor to the 11th floor. Ha, I think he's coming to challenge my 12th floor today. Just thinking about it makes me excited." Ginkgo Fairy clasped her hands together like a fangirl reaching out to her idol. "I really want to see what that man looks like. Do you think he's willing to stay and be my husband?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes. "You two sisters can't think of anything else other than husband." Peony Fairy said expressionlessly, "You'll see when you turn around." "Huh? I said, turn around and you'll see him." The Peony Fairy was so angry that she slapped her younger sister's head. "Are you a pig?" She clearly knew that he was coming up. "You even dared to come to my 13th floor. Aren't you going easy on him and allowing him to pass through the 12th level?" The Ginkgo Fairy turned around in a daze. When she saw the figure of the man standing in front of the passage, her pink mouth immediately opened wide. Wow! The black-clothed young man at the door was elegant and graceful. His features were picturesque, and he was indescribably handsome. He just stood at the side of the door with an indifferent expression. His pair of phoenix eyes swept across the people on the 13th floor. The two women immediately felt as if they were electrocuted by his gaze. They were completely unable to move a finger. When Ji-Chin saw the man at the door, he couldn't help but laugh. "Yo, you're here too." Limitless Blade, the young man who was hung on the wall by the spirit-binding rope, was also amused. "Yo, kid, you actually managed to meet an old friend in a foreign land." Chapter 1644. How about we discuss something? Why don't you two think of a way to release me from this god-locking rope? With the three of us working together, killing these two women will be a matter of minutes. Bang! As soon as she finished speaking, the small thunder hammer in the Peony Fairy's hand immediately released a bolt of lightning, directly bombarding Dao Wuji's head. Fuck. A hole was about to be blown out of his head. Dao Wuji grimaced and glared at the peony fairy. Can you be a bit lighter? In any case, I have lived on your floor for 10 years. Isn't it good to have a little tenant hobby? This guy's mouth was cheap, he was looking for a beating. Ji Chen looked at Dao Wuji without the slightest sympathy, and laughed as she leaped forward. I have challenged the tower so many times, but this is the first time I have met someone who can challenge the tower together. I don't know what the heavenly Dao is up to, but I always feel that there is a follow-up move waiting for them. Boss, how about us two brothers block these two women for you first? You go up first. A simple and honest voice came from outside the passage. Peony and Ginkgo both widened their eyes, looking in astonishment at the pair of brothers who walked into the 13th floor. The pair of brothers' sturdy bodies blocked the entrance, immediately blocking the passage. The tower-like man with dark skin looked very similar. They both had wide mouths and sword-like eyebrows, neat short black hair, and a red cloth band tied on each of their foreheads. You two. Aren't you the Luo brothers? Weren't these the Luo brothers who guarded the 10th floor of the tower? Ginkgo and Peony were both shocked. The Luo brothers actually called this man boss. The two turned to look at the expressionless man at the same time, unable to conceal a trace of astonishment in their eyes. This man subdued the Luo brothers. However, in front of the man, the words that Sister Ginkgo originally wanted to ask disappeared in an instant. Looking at that handsome face, Fairy Ginkgo immediately threw away her helmet and abandoned her armor. She took a step forward, and asked in an extremely strange and soft voice, "Little brother, do you lack a wife?" Ji Chen on the side couldn't hold back her laughter, and burst out laughing. He really doesn't lack a wife. Mo Yen turned her head and looked at Hu Jinchen with a trace of doubt in her eyes. He thought that it would be impossible for him to meet He Chen in the Tower of Punishment. What was going on this time? The Heavenly Dao actually didn't set up a barrier to separate everyone who challenged the tower from each other. Beauty, do you really not lack a wife? Fairy Ginkgo asked with a look of disappointment. Then are you willing to stay in our Tower of Punishment? What answered her was Mo Yen abruptly flinging a flame at her. He Chen laughed loudly. Suddenly, he threw a punch at his old rival, the Peony Fairy. Peony, why don't we make a deal? How about you let us out of the tower? I'll let Mo Yen drink with you for free. It's more appropriate to stay behind and be the husband of the fort. You want to dismiss me, Peony, with just a few drinks? Do you think I'm as stupid as Ginkgo? Peony's expression suddenly turned solemn. The small hammer in her left hand flashed, and a bolt of lightning pounced down. Falling straight down on, hanging on the wall on Dao Wuji's body. Dao Wuji was caught off guard this time, and was immediately electrocuted to the point of ecstasy. He couldn't help but curse, "Don't you fucking have eyes? Who are you striking? What are you striking your grandpa for?" The small lightning hammer in Peony's hand suddenly grew half a meter in the wind. She reached out with her hand and rested the hammer on her shoulder. Chapter 1645. She flashed to the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's side and hammered his head. The Peony Fairy's lips curled into a wide smile. Our cultivations are about the same, but in this Tower of Punishment, your cultivation is suppressed to the God realm. Do you think you can fight me for more than 100 moves if I get serious? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal smiled at her. He stretched out his slender fingers and waved them in front of her. A wooden vine suddenly whipped around the Peony Fairy's arm. I asked you to stay with me, but you didn't want to. Now you're using a wooden vine to wrap around my arm. The Peony Fairy cast a coquettish glance at him. However, her face was now red, and it was quite an eyesore to look at. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal narrowed his eyes at her. With a flip of his hand, the Peony Fairy suddenly felt the ground beneath her feet sink. When she looked down again, the Peony Fairy could not help but be shocked. It turned out that countless vines had drilled out of the ground at some point in time and were tightly wrapped around her feet. The peony fairy struggled hard and realized that she could not break free from the binding power of the wooden vines. The vines on the ground wrapped around her limbs and gradually climbed up. In a short while, the peony fairy's entire body was tightly wrapped. It was as if she was wrapped in a wooden cocoon. Her entire body was lifted into the air and hung high on a wooden vine. Don't waste your energy. Seeing that she was still struggling, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal could not help but say coldly, "These little cuties of mine will continuously absorb the power in your body." As time passed, the wooden vines wrapped around the peony fairy would only become stronger and stronger. The peony fairy, on the other hand, would gradually weaken as the saint power in her body was drained. After the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal temporarily fixed the peony fairy, he turned to look at Mo Lien on the other side. Mo Lien's speed of action was even faster. While the peony fairy was being hung up by Ji Chen, the battle between Mo Lien and Ginkgo had already ended. It was laughable. Halfway through the battle, Ginkgo fairy held her sword and stared blankly at Prince Mo's approaching figure. On the other side, Prince Mo, who never knew how to be gentle with women, naturally acted according to the situation. He decisively chopped down with his blade and knocked Fairy Ginkgo unconscious. Therefore, there was no suspense in this battle at all, because the opponent was a weirdo who only knew how to look at handsome men. Prince Mo walked forward with a cold expression. Dao Wuji, who was hanging on the wall, hurriedly called out to him, "Hey little brother, can you help me release this god-locking rope?" Mo Lien turned her head to look at him. The purple flame in her hand suddenly turned into 3 purple knives, which flew toward Dao Wuji's arm. Endless Blade broke out in a cold sweat at his actions. What kind of joke was this? If he was struck by this purple flame, how could his arm be preserved? Bang! Bang! The spirit-binding rope suddenly broke apart. There were still a few purple sparks of fire on it. With a few cracking sounds, the spirit-binding rope broke into pieces and fell to the ground. Dao Wuji let out a long breath, looking at the young man in front of him with a slightly complicated expression. Sigh, the new generation really excels the old. Hu Shichen alone was enough to deal a blow to him. Now, this young man was even more impressive. Looking back at the peony fairy, who was hanging in mid-air by the wooden vines, Dao Wuji grinned. "Let's go to the 14th level, I'll make up for it tomorrow. I'll break it today." Chapter 1646. Put me down, put me down. The peony fairy, who had half of her strength absorbed by the wooden vines, was hanging in mid-air, shaking her delicate body desperately. She shouted angrily, Shichen, Shichen. Do you think it's appropriate for you to run away and leave me here?" "It's appropriate." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal blinked and nodded vigorously. He thought it was very appropriate. Could it be that he had masochistic tendencies? It was not easy to hang this noisy woman up, so how could he go up and let her go now? Stop joking. How could he, Shichen, do such a thing? Shichen, Shichen. Seeing that the man was about to run away without looking back, the peony fairy could not help but panic. Shichen. And that person? That little fellow. Stop right there. The Luo brothers on the 10th floor, what's wrong with you? The 2 brothers, who were as tall as iron towers, looked at each other and sympathetically at the peony fairy. "Peony, we are friends. Let me give you a piece of advice. Don't look for trouble. Quickly get rid of them." The peony fairy was speechless. "Shichen, do you think you can escape from the 17th floor of the Tower of Punishment just like this? Let me tell you. Even if you bring these 2 traitors, it's useless. The people upstairs are not the group of rookies downstairs. Besides, even if the brothers and sisters downstairs have been defeated by you once, if they join forces, you won't be able to handle them. After saying that, she added angrily, even if you add these two traitors, can the 5 of you deal with the many brothers and sisters downstairs? Dao Wuji immediately pulled out the saber at his waist and smashed it on the wall beside him. Shut up, you woman. I've been listening to you for 10 years. Why are you still so long-winded before we leave? Dao Wuji, you're itching for a beating. Be careful or I'll destroy you with heavenly lightning. Come on, come on. Dao Wuji swung the long saber in his hand smugly. If you have the guts, don't run. Wait here. The brothers downstairs will definitely come up soon. Forget it, Peony. The Luo brothers speechlessly glanced at the Peony fairy, who was wrapped in a wooden cocoon. Do you think the brothers downstairs are all idiots? Those who admit defeat all follow my big brother. Those who didn't submit are all dead now. What? The Peony fairy was stupefied. What do you mean? Where are the poisonous spiders on the 8th floor? 8th floor. The Luo brothers rolled their eyes. The 8th floor has been razed to the ground. What venomous spiders? There's nothing left of venomous spiders. Poisonous spider was killed. The Peony fairy was shocked. You two bastards. Venomous spider has been killed by someone. How can you be so indifferent? The Luo brothers looked at each other in confusion. Poisonous spider's mother isn't even our biological mother. What does her death have to do with us brothers? The Peony fairy nodded and said, that's true. Everyone was speechless. Are you a fucking joker? I thought you were going to continue scolding me righteously, but who would have thought? He Chen, put me down. At most, I won't ask you to be my husband. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal sneered mockingly. You think you can suppress me with your skills? Okay. He Chen, haven't you been suppressed by me before? Didn't you rest for 7 days before you waited for an opportunity to counterattack? You suppressed me. Chapter 1647. Master Immortal, Strange. Why does this conversation sound so unpleasant to the ear? He kept feeling that something was wrong. Especially when he noticed the strange look in Prince Mo's eyes, he couldn't help but glare at him. What are you looking at? Let's go. He-Chen grumpily walked toward the passage on the 14th floor and asked, Mo Yen, since you are here, what about my little girl? Mo Yen glanced at him grumpily and turned to leave. What do you mean by your little girl? She is mine. Huh? He-Chen, are you really not going to let me down? He-Chen. He. Thud. The Peony fairy felt the wooden cocoon on her head loosen slightly, and she slid down. Because the wooden vines had absorbed more than half of her saint energy, the Peony fairy felt that her head was heavy and her feet were light. She almost tripped and fell to the ground. When she looked up, she saw that they had entered the passage. The Peony fairy couldn't help but snort and say sarcastically, the little Taisui on the 14th floor is not easy to deal with. You guys have to be careful. His earth-spirit bonding technique has already reached the peak of perfection. Even I am not his opponent. Wuji Dao pursed his lips. Damn, this old woman is really a strange person. But without her advice, it is just a little Taisui. Do you think the 5 of us can't kill it? Mo Yen and He-Chen both ignored this dunce. After they reached the 14th floor, they didn't feel anything wrong. In the middle of the empty floor, they could see the end of it. There was no one. Don't tell me that little Taisui is hiding after seeing that there are so many of us. Dao Wuji laughed heartily. Mo Yen, He-Chen, and the Luo brothers all ignored him. Wuji Dao wanted to walk toward the center of the tower, but he found that he couldn't lift his feet. Looking down, he couldn't help but be shocked. My leg. My legs are gone. He-Chen didn't want to talk to this idiot. What legs? Aren't your legs here? However, He was entangled by a layer of soft mud, and his legs sank into the thick layer of soft mud. As soon as they entered the 14th level, little Taisui launched an earth spirit attack at them. Yuan Shichen snorted, and an emerald green seedling suddenly drilled out of the soil. At first it was just a thin and weak seedling, but then, as if it had eaten a growth stimulant, it began to sprout branches and leaves, and gradually grew stronger. Not long after, a towering tree grew in the center of the tower. Several branches of the big tree spread out and wrapped around the waists of He-Chen, Mo Lien and the others. With just a light lift, the 5 of them were lifted up at the same time, and their feet left the shackles of the soil. "Heh, taste my stone rain." A childish voice suddenly came out from the corner. All of a sudden, everyone felt a dark cloud pressing down on them. When they looked up, they saw a round of boulders being released like a violent storm. Mo Lien, He-Chen, the Luo brothers, and Wuji Dao all released their own defensive enchantments at the same time to block this stone rain. Wuji Dao used his holy power to protect his body, and he couldn't help but curse, "Holy fuck, where did this perverted brat come from? What kind of hero is he to hide his head and show his tail? Come out if you have the guts. Flaunting your seniority, go die." The childish voice suddenly sounded in Wuji Dao's ears. Wuji Dao only felt that the stone rain above his head was becoming denser and denser. Chapter 1648. In this round of attacks, the defensive barrier was clearly weakened by several points, causing his expression to change slightly. Break. After a child's voice, the dense stone rain fell on Dao Wuji one after another. Dao Wuji was caught off guard and took the full brunt of the stone rain. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, and the defensive barrier on his body was suddenly torn apart by the power of the little Taisui. His entire body was like a sparrow hawk that had its string cut. He was swept away by a surge of power and fell heavily to the ground. CK. The unlucky Dao Wuji spat out another mouthful of blood, and his aura suddenly withered. One had to know that this old guy was also a very unlucky person. He had been locked in this tower of punishment for at least 10 years. Ever since he reached the 13th floor, he was detained by the Peony Fairy, so he never knew that the little Taisui on the 14th floor was actually such a terrifying figure. Cough cough, cough. Dao Wuji was also a tough guy. Although he was beaten to the ground, his spirit did not collapse. Raising a thumb, Dao Wuji gestured toward an unknown corner. The guardian of the 14th floor is really powerful. This old man is convinced. If you're convinced, then get the hell out of here immediately. The child's voice carried a trace of incongruous coldness. And you two traitors, leave your lives here today. The rain of stones accumulated power in the air for a moment, then suddenly turned around and headed straight for the Luo brothers' heads. You're courting death. Mo Lien sneered and waved her hand, and an ink-colored lotus flower floated out with a snap of her fingers. It crashed into the stone rain, causing a violent tremor. Mo Lien pulled out the Raven Moon sword with her left hand, and a few sword shadows appeared in the air, directly tearing apart the stone rain above her head, and wantonly rampaging through it. He-Chen looked up, and his eyes couldn't help but darken a little. Yet she saw Crown Prince Mo draw the word death in the rain of stones like a swimming dragon with his sword. The sword chi surged, expanded, and suddenly exploded again. The force of the shock wave once again threw the passerby, Dao Wuji, who was lying on the ground to watch the show. He rolled to the corner of the wall, and this time he really couldn't get up. Innocent. Dao Wuji wanted to cry tears of sympathy for himself. Every time the Almighty fought, the one who suffered was always a small fry like him. The stone rain dispersed, and the child's voice was silent for a while. Suddenly, he said coldly, "Boy, you're quite powerful. However, if you want to break through this level of mine, just this bit of ability is far from enough." The child's voice became cold again. As the voice fell, a small figure drilled out from the wall. A pair of cold silver eyes looked indifferently at the people on the floor, as if staring at a few dead people. I am your little Taisui. Hu Shichen was speechless. The child's lips were red and his teeth were white. He looked like a golden child. Perhaps it was because he had been locked in the pagoda for a long time, but his complexion was extremely pale and abnormal. The heavenly Tao is too shameless. It actually caught a child to be the guardian of the tower. Was there any justice in this world? What did this child do to him? The heavenly Tao was actually such a heavenly Tao. Sigh, what a disappointment. Little fellow, how many years have you been guarding the 14th floor by yourself? Why don't we go out together? Chapter 1649. Nonsense, the childlike voice rebuked angrily. Little Taisui's expression was cold, and his eyes were as cold as ice. He stared deeply at Ma Shichen. Do you know how old I am? How dare you call me a little guy? Do you want to die? How old are you? Ma Shichen asked curiously, by the way, do you know where the guardian of the 14th level, Dungeon, went? Oh, you're the boyfriend that Dungeon was willing to betray the heavenly Tao to protect, Ma Shichen. Master Ma Shichen, that's strange. Why does it feel like something's not right? Do you want to know where he is? Little Taisui suddenly smiled at Ma Shichen. However, it was better not to smile like that. That fake smile that tugged at the corners of his mouth really made people shudder. Little Taisui suddenly flipped his hand, and a transparent earth-type cage appeared in his palm. Upon closer inspection, one could see a small, transparent figure inside the cage. It was like a little sparrow, and it was gripping the earthen pillar of the cage tightly as it cried out to Ma Shichen with tears in its eyes, Ma Shichen, save me, save me. Ma Shichen's lips twitched involuntarily. Dungeon, how are you? Little Taisui destroyed my physical body, and he didn't even spare my divine sense. Wah! He said he was going to lock me up for 1,000 years. You're even going to make me sob. I can't even die. Wah! My dignity, my honor, everything that I had in the past has vanished along with the destruction of my physical body. The transparent figure in the earthen prison waved its arms and pounded its chest as it wailed and wailed. Mo Lian's face was expressionless. However, Ma Shichen couldn't bear to look at it. When were you locked up? 2 years ago. The figure waved its arms and legs. Ma Shichen, you have to save me. You don't know how malicious little Taisui is. This earthen prison is far from as peaceful as it appears to be. This earthen prison will launch an attack on my divine sense every other day. It's so scary, so scary, so scary. Let me out. I don't want to stay in this dark room anymore. Little Taisui didn't wait for Dunzong to finish complaining. He directly stuffed the dungeon into his sleeve. With a hint of coldness in his silver eyes, he indifferently stared at Shichen in front of him. You want to save him? Use your own life in exchange for it. Shichen shook his head like a rattledrum and said firmly, no. Little Taisui's expression immediately became a little peculiar, and it looked at Ma Shichen with disdain. Humans really are selfish things. Idiot, did you hear that? You have violated the heavenly Tao time and time again. The people released from the Tower of Punishment will not know how to be grateful. Little Taisui patted its left sleeve, as if it was reminding Dunzong in the cage. Instantly, there was no sound. Little Taisui thought that he was very disappointed, and the corners of its mouth involuntarily curled up into a mocking smile. Shichen, since you've returned, you can stay in the realm of punishment forever. Hee hee. Ma Shichen hurled several hundred wooden spikes at little Taisui. Instantly, the wooden spikes flew toward little Taisui in unison, forming a semicircle in front of him, almost completely enveloping his small body. Light of a firefly. Little Tai Sui muttered in a cold voice. Little Tai Sui didn't move at all. With just a light stomp of his foot, the wooden spikes that had formed a semicircle in front of him were all reduced to dust. I'm not done yet. Chapter 1650. Mo Lien's eyes flickered, and she finally looked at the little Tai Sui with a serious expression. This kid looks pretty strong. I'll take you on. Prince Mo's figure flickered, and he was already in front of the little Tai Sui. A wisp of black flames suddenly slid past the little Tai Sui's eyes, and the little Tai Sui's usually indifferent face couldn't help but be stunned. His body reacted faster than his brain, and he dodged the black flames with a twist of his body. The little Tai Sui lowered his head and looked at the small, deep pit that had been blasted into the ground. His two delicate little eyebrows were knitted together. It's actually a holy flame, the little Tai Sui muttered to himself. He looked up with uncertainty and took a deep look at Mo Lien. Who are you? Prince Mo's lips curled into a mocking smile. You only have the right to ask me if you can beat me. Heh, how many years has it been since I've met such an arrogant brat? I'll meet you for a while. Before he could finish speaking, he saw that Crown Prince Mo had already moved, and clusters of black flames dashed toward him like shooting stars. The little Tai Sui couldn't help but frown slightly. It seemed that he had bitten off a tough bone today. On the other side, in the hinterland of an area like the lava mountain range, Arbor came back after a round of cleaning. Among the 100 or so foxes, he only picked up a dozen or so crystal cores. This was because not all beasts had crystal cores in their heads. After running back, Arbor saw the little fatty lying flat on a rock. He couldn't help but find it a little funny. Hey, get up, drink some water, eat something, and rest. Mata was holding a water bag in her hand. She looked at the fatty with a smile. Fatty, didn't you bring a lot of water? Hurry up and take out a water bottle to drink. Look at your face. It's so red that it's a little abnormal. In the hinterland of the lava mountain range, in the scorching hot environment, it was as if a person had been thrown into a furnace and was constantly being roasted. If they couldn't replenish their water in time, the water in their body would be lost too quickly, and they definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. That won't do. The little fatty shook his head and licked his dry lips. Although I brought a lot of water with me this time, but look at this place, the environment is so bad. God knows how many more days we'll have to spend here. If we drink all the water on the first day, what are we going to do for the next few days? Mata nodded. Yo, I didn't expect a little fatty like you to have such a sense of crisis. That was indeed the case. Back then, when we were training here, the third day was the most difficult day. Mata looked as if he was reminiscing about the past and sighed. At that time, we were in a state of almost no water and food. I don't even know how we managed to survive the next few days. When the little fatty heard this, he quickly sat up and asked, Senior Brother Mata, what happened after that? How did you persevere? Mata shrugged and said with a smile, yes, with willpower. Persevere with your own willpower. Sometimes, when we think we're reaching our limit, we can't help ourselves. Actually, we can still continue to persevere. Hearing this, Qi Xianxian scoffed, oh. In a state of no water and no food, you can still persevere for 3 to 4 days. It was still okay if there was no food, but in such a scorching environment, without water, it was really not a place for people to stay. If they really reached the point of no water, in such a furnace-like mountain, the consumption of their body would be even greater. Chapter 1651. Especially the last 2 days, it would be even more unbearable. How could the human body endure it then? How could one endure it? This was an impossible thing. Unless one's body was so tough that they had shed their mortal bones and entered the mystic skeleton stage. Otherwise, a normal person's body would not be able to endure such a test. This was not an ordinary environment where cultivators could go without food or water for 8 to 10 days. As long as they entered a sealed cultivation environment, they would be able to endure hunger. Now that they were in such a hot environment, the consumption of their physical strength would increase exponentially. Mata could not help but smile, and winked at Qi Xianxian. All right. Originally, I wanted to show off in front of you all, but unexpectedly, you saw through me. Actually, at that time, I secretly hid a small flask of water. It was because of that small flask of water that I managed to endure until the end. Every time I looked at that small flask of water, it was as if I was hinting to myself that I had already drunk the water, I had already drunk it. Then, I did not know why, but I managed to endure it. Mata smiled bitterly. You don't say, ever since I went through this lava mountain range trial. I treasured every drop of water. At that time, I did not know how I managed to endure it. Every time I opened the flask, I would only touch my lips and drink 1 or 2 drops each time. Thinking of those bitter days, Mata felt that he had no hope in life at that time. Hearing this senior brother's bitter experience, everyone could not help but look at him sympathetically. Mata noticed the gazes of his junior sisters, and could not help but touch his nose awkwardly. So this time, before entering the lava mountain range, I did not need teacher's reminder at all. I took out all the water stored in my inner world. Mata took off his outer clothes, revealing the flask hanging on his waist, which was even more than the little fatty's. Everyone could not help but twitch their mouths. You are really well prepared. Qi Xianxian was speechless. He. Mata smiled. Of course. Don't tell me that water is our life in the lava mountain range. Starving for 2 days is not a problem for people of our realm. However, the lack of water is really uncomfortable. Arbor looked at them speechlessly, and said to the little fatty, drink, don't die of thirst. Little fatty shook his head vigorously. No, I can't drink it. It was only the first day, and he had been here for less than 4 hours. I'll hold on. Arbor. Actually, you don't have to be so frugal. Don't worry. Drink if you want. Don't choke yourself. Arbor said. Qi Xianxian nodded and said, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Maybe we can complete the mission in 2 or 3 days. Everyone looked at Qi Xianxian with a, you must be dreaming, expression. Qi Xianxian rubbed her nose and said, I agree with Jojo. After drinking, eating, and recuperating, we'll be on our way. As long as I can kill 10 second-grade spirit beasts as soon as possible, wouldn't I be able to complete my task? Then, we will be able to summon our teacher and bring us back. Little Fatty thought about it and agreed. If he didn't drink the water here, he would be the one suffering. If he really became dehydrated, he might even implicate his teammates. Little Fatty thought for a while, took out his flask, and gulped down half of the water in one go. Then, he sighed and looked at Arbor. Sigh, after drinking the water, I feel even hungrier. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. Didn't you bring a few steamed buns? Chapter 1652. Just eat 2, Arbor said with a speechless expression. When they set off, they wanted to carry as much water as possible, so they took relatively less food. The little fatty took out a bag of plain white steamed buns without any fillings from his bag and took out 2 of them. He handed one to Arbor and Qi Xianxian, and he actually planned to split the other one into 3 portions to share with Duan Wuqing and Mata. Arbor was speechless. Why did he feel like he couldn't bear to look at this? Such a small bun was only the size of a palm. It was barely enough for 2 girls, let alone 3 men. Arbor was speechless. However, she didn't want to take out the food and water from Paradise Planet for the time being. After all, they were here to train in the Lava Mountain Range, not for a vacation. Unless there was no other choice, it was better to persevere and train their willpower like what Mata said. Little Fatty held a third of the bun and ate it with relish. Arbor had originally wanted to secretly replenish their food, but he gave up on that idea for the time being. Little Fatty was so stingy that he even wanted to share a bun with 3 people. She guessed that he wanted to divide his food supply into many portions. Speaking of which, that bag of mantus could be finished by the little Fatty within a day if he ate as much as he wanted. But now, he wanted to rely on his pitiful rations to hold out for 7 days. Qi Xianxian didn't make any preparations. She only took out a bottle of water and a bag of snacks from her inner world before entering the lava mountain range and kept them close to her body. Seeing the 3 men so pitifully sharing a bun, she couldn't help but look at them sympathetically. She tilted her head and thought for a while. Then, she still took out 2 pieces of pastries from the bag of rations. She gave 1 piece to Duan Muqing and the other 2 men, and shared the other piece with Arbor. Arbor looked at Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian. They were so stingy that he couldn't say anything else. The 5 of them rested for a while. After eating and drinking, they planned to set off to look for second-grade spirit beasts. In this lava mountain range, as far as the eye could see, there were basically huge red rocks. Today is the first day. Right now, we're the ones with the most energy. Duan Muqing said, I think our goal today should be to hunt at least 3 second-grade spirit beasts. Mata and the others nodded. The little Fatty smiled in a simple and honest manner, but our biggest problem now is where are we going to find those second-grade spirit beasts? If we just wander aimlessly in the lava mountain range, the first thing we will exhaust is our own physical strength. Arbor blinked, coughed lightly, and said, actually, I have a way to solve this once and for all. However, although the method was good, the actual process was a little dangerous. Are you willing to take the risk? Duan Muqing was stunned. He turned to look at Arbor and couldn't help but ask, what idea do you have? Why don't you tell us so that we can discuss it? Arbor turned to look at him and nodded. Actually, I can refine a kind of medicinal powder to attract mystic beasts. It's just that this medicinal powder has to be controlled to a certain amount. But even I can't control this amount. Because, cough cough, if we spread too much medicinal powder, it might attract all the mystic beasts in this area. When that happens, I'm afraid we won't be able to handle it. Chapter 1653. Qi Xianxian and Little Fatty widened their eyes in shock when they heard this. You actually have such a strange method to attract Xian beasts. Qi Xuanxuan's mouth was wide open. Little Fatty added, isn't that great? You can refine this medicinal powder. We can wait patiently for those Xian beasts to come to us. Yes. When the time comes, we'll kill one if one comes. If 2 come, we'll kill both. Who knows, we might even be able to complete the mission on the first day and leave this godforsaken place. Qi Xianxian chuckled. Everyone looked at Qi Xianxian with a speechless expression. Miss, you're so optimistic. Arbor shook her head. The amount of this medicinal powder can't be controlled. If it's too little, we might not be able to attract many Xian beasts. But if it's too much, we'll be surrounded and attacked by the Xian beasts. Who knows, we might even be exhausted to death. Of course, that kind of situation definitely didn't exist. If it was really a critical moment, Arbor could also get Little Tree to drag them into Paradise Planet. But in this way, the true meaning of training was lost. Then why don't you refine this medicinal powder first, and we'll try to see if it works by sprinkling a little. If it works, we can increase the amount. Duan Muqing suggested. Arbor nodded. Then we won't need to try it once. They would need to try many times to be able to control the amount of this medicinal powder. Arbor secretly pursed her lips. Duan Muqing looked at her and asked, then how long do you need to refine this medicinal powder? Arbor waved her hand, and the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron suddenly appeared in her hand. Everyone only saw a small copper cauldron in her palm. After a few seconds, the cauldron grew in size and landed on the reddish-brown ground with a thud. At the same time, a few medicinal ingredients were also in Arbor's hand. I need about 5 minutes to refine this medicinal powder. She only needed 5 minutes to refine a medicinal powder that could attract Xian beasts. Everyone looked at her in shock. The way this girl refined the medicinal powder seemed to be a little casual. She seemed to be carelessly throwing a few medicinal ingredients into the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. In fact, the amount of medicinal herbs used was just right. Everyone stared at him intently. Arbor waved his hand and gently patted the lid of the cauldron. Clusters of crimson flames automatically rose from the cauldron. The body of the red copper cauldron instantly became transparent and beautiful like colored glass. The medicine cauldron spun slowly, and 2 of the 9 stars on the cauldron immediately lit up. This was the subtlety of the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. Arbor had been refining medicinal pills a while ago, and had already practiced with the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron for a while, so he already had a good understanding of it. The meaning of these 9 stars was extraordinary. Ever since the 2nd star on the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron lit up, she realized that the refining speed of the small cauldron had obviously doubled. Therefore, she suspected that every star on the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron was extraordinary. Unfortunately, this small cauldron had a huge appetite. If he wanted the 9 stars on the small cauldron to light up one by one, he had to feed it a large amount of rare ores. Last time, she had fed the small cauldron a lot of high-grade forging materials. She had watched as the cauldron's fire turned these materials into liquid and was absorbed by the small cauldron. But repeatedly feeding it high-grade forging materials was not enough to satisfy the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron's huge appetite. Chapter 1654. In the end, it was the 2 small grains of Arctic star gravel that allowed it to rise by a level, and the 2nd star of the 9 stars finally lit up. Refining some powder that could attract mystical beasts was simply a piece of cake for the current 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. Thus, the powder in the cauldron quickly took shape. The moment Arbor opened the cauldron lid, everyone looked into the cauldron with interest, only to see a thick layer of white powder covering the walls and bottom of the cauldron. Arbor stretched out her hand and lightly patted the powder, causing it to jump up and be absorbed by a porcelain bottle in her palm. Qi Xian blinked and asked curiously, "That's it?" Arbor nodded and flipped the porcelain bottle upside down. She casually sprinkled some of the powder out, and with a slight sweep of her sleeve, the powder was dispersed by the wind. "Let's hide and watch first." Arbor was naturally unwilling to stand here and act as a target. Following that, the few of them hid behind the rocks and watched the situation unfold. Because Arbor was still unable to control the amount of powder she used, she only took a small amount and mixed it into the air, causing the powder to scatter. The few of them hid behind the rocks and waited. Not long after, they saw 2 to 3 level 12 mystical beasts wobbling over. Arbor abruptly jumped out from behind the huge rock and waved her small hand. The remaining 4 people immediately jumped over and gathered their strength without any explanation. With a wave of violent attacks, the 3 unlucky mystical beasts were killed in a short while. Arbor lowered her head and rummaged through the crystal cores. She only found a small piece on one of the mystical beasts. She turned around and gestured to everyone to hide. With her head lowered, Arbor once again pulled out a small bottle from her sleeve and poured out some powder that attracted mystical beasts. However, just as she was about to put away the small bottle, she heard a girl's giggle from not far away. This giggle made her hair stand on end. Arbor's small hand trembled slightly for no reason. That pinch of powder that attracted mystical beasts was unavoidably twice as much as before. When she turned around and realized that something was wrong, she took back the porcelain bottle. By then, the powder had already spread in all directions with the flow of the air. Arbor felt guilty for a moment. He hurriedly pulled Qi Xianxian, who was sticking her head out to look around, and gestured to Duan Wuqing and the other two. The five of them quickly found a place to hide. Just as he finished hiding, he heard a flurry of footsteps approaching from afar. However, he heard the woman's voice say, "The fire-belly snake has always been something that can only be found by chance. These little things like hot places the most. I think there must be some in the lava mountain range. It's just that." The woman's voice paused for a moment before she continued with a smile, "The fire-belly snake moves very quickly, and its body is very short and agile. I'm afraid it will be very difficult to catch it alive. The mission given by Fairy Yellow Crane this time is to obtain 3 live fire vipers." A cold voice interrupted the woman's words. "Otherwise, the mission will be considered a failure. Fairy has no obligation to pay half a spirit coin." The young woman, who was surrounded by everyone like a moon surrounded by a myriad of stars, looked to be about 27 or 28 years old. She was born with a charming appearance. This was Fairy Yellow Crane, who was equally famous as the beautiful fairy from the Palace of Cold Blood. She was one of the 5 most capable subordinates of Shantian Prefecture's current prefecture lord. Chapter 1655. Lava Mountain Range was an open forest. If someone wanted to enter to search for snake gall and medicinal herbs, it was possible. This time, Fairy Yellow Crane had issued a mission to search for fire vipers. The snake gall of fire vipers was an important component in refining fire spirit pills. Fairy Yellow Crane's objective was self-evident. She was an extremely famous pill refiner in Shantian Prefecture. She wanted to refine a black-grade fire spirit pill that could raise fire spirit energy. However, it was a pity that their team had been roaming around the lava mountains for 3 to 5 days without seeing any signs of the fire vipers. On the other hand, they were running out of water and rations. Fairy Yellow Crane looked at the 10 overexhausted team members and frowned slightly. "Why don't we discuss this? Next, should we leave Lava Mountain Range first and go to the nearby village to replenish our supplies, or continue searching here until we complete the mission?" A female team member in the team immediately raised her hand and said, "I feel that we should leave and rest first. Otherwise, if we forcefully stay in this Lava Mountain Range, not to mention not finding any fire vipers, even our own lives are about to be exhausted." Fairy Yellow Crane was stunned for a while when she heard that. Then she sighed and nodded. "All right then, let's leave Lava Mountain Range first. Fire vipers." Suddenly, a male team member pointed at a small red snake that had squeezed out from a crack in the rock and suddenly exclaimed, "Heh, speaking of fire vipers would appear." Previously, they were still worried that after wandering around the Lava Mountain Range for so long, they hadn't seen anything like the fire viper, which was originally very common. Perhaps there really weren't any fire vipers in this mountain range. Who would have thought that just as they were talking, without any warning, a fire viper would slip out from a crack in the rock? Ha ha ha, this was really finding something by chance after wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search. 1, 2, 3. When she saw over 100 fire vipers twisting their way over, Fairy Yellow Crane's originally happy face turned black. Don't let these fire vipers surround us. Prepare for battle. Prepare for battle." Another person shouted loudly and his face instantly changed. What kind of joke was this? If they were surrounded by these fire-venomous snakes, no matter how many people there were, they wouldn't be able to survive. Although these fire-venomous snakes were commonly seen, they were extremely difficult to deal with when grouped together. When there are only 1 or 2 of them, you don't have to be afraid of them at all. Just deal with them directly. But now what was the meaning of this group of fire-venomous snakes? Fairy Yellow Crane led a group of exhausted teammates to begin the battle. Arbor and the others hid behind the boulder and watched the battle between the unlucky bastards and the snakes from afar. Fairy Yellow Crane summoned a palm-sized fireball and threw it at the group of snakes. Immediately, more than 10 fire vipers crawling on the ground were wiped out. Barely resisting the urge to vomit, Fairy Yellow Crane frowned and said, "Everyone, work harder. We can't fail miserably at such an easy task. Once we finish off this batch of fire-venomous snakes, as long as we can get 3 gallbladders, our mission will be considered complete. This time, I will give everyone some appropriate compensation." Fairy Yellow Crane's words once again aroused the enthusiasm of the crowd. In any case, with a generous reward, there would definitely be brave men. For the sake of the spirit coins, a portion of the people also gave it their all. Chapter 1656. Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian squatted by Arbor's side, looking at the group that was fighting intensely with the snake horde. They lowered their voices and asked, "Jojo, when are these snakes going to retreat? They're not spirit beasts either. They're not what we're going to deal with." Arbor looked at the fierce battle in the distance expressionlessly. "How would I know? This kind of medicinal powder that attracted mystic beasts could stay in the air for at least 1 to 4 hours. Humans would not be able to smell it, but if beasts smelled it, they would naturally rush over." It seemed that her little hand had trembled just now, and she had scattered too much medicinal powder. However, this was something that could not be helped. She could not get it back even if she scattered it too much. She could only say that Fairy Yellow Crane and her group were unlucky. Who asked them to appear with crooked smiles when she was sprinkling the powder on the table? Arbor pulled Qi Xianxian back, pulling the two's probing heads back. As they were talking quietly, they suddenly heard the howls of tigers and wolves from afar, accompanied by the cries of wild elephants. Arbor reached out and pressed down on Qi Xuanxuan's little head, then he stuck his little head out of the rock. With one look, he hurriedly pulled his head back. Meeting the inquisitive gazes of the other 4, Arbor coughed softly. "No, nothing." The 4 instantly looked at him with a "look at your expression, you don't look like you're fine" gaze. Qi Xianxian could not hold back and hurriedly stuck her head out of the big rock. With just one look, if Arbor had not suddenly reached out and covered her mouth, Qi Xianxian would have cried out in shock. "What the hell, how many beasts are there outside? Jackals, wolves, tigers, leopards, fucking all came, and there were also many wild elephants." They moved their fat legs and stepped on the red mud, chasing after a battered and exhausted group, rushing towards Fairy Yellow Crane's direction. Che Rumen and Li Qian probably felt that they had never been so unlucky in their entire lives. Clearly, their group had been hunting for level 15 mystic beasts, but suddenly, a group of mystic beasts rushed out and attacked their group without any explanation. Was there any justice left in this world? These dumb beasts seemed to have been provoked by something as they chased after their own group without any regard for their lives. Where did this irreconcilable hatred come from? Was it worth it for them to attack as a group? Che Rumen and Li Qian could not understand why everything was going well before, but from just now, everything had developed in an abnormal direction. The mystic beasts in the area all gathered together and attacked them. Could it be that someone was secretly manipulating this situation? Che Rumen's fist, which contained the power of fire spirit, smashed hard on the head of one of the jackals, directly smashing its head into its neck and causing it to cave in. While she was at it with a kick. That huge kick sent the grey wolf flying into the air. With a bang, it collided head-on with a tiger that was charging at it. With Rumen with a roar with Arto 2s, of the Arto 2s even was to Che. Che Rumen jumped in fright and hurriedly twisted the ring on her finger, activating the defensive barrier at the first moment. In the blink of an eye, the tiger had already pounced in front of Che Rumen. Its claws tore forward, but it was blocked by the tough defensive barrier. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.